Hello, and welcome to Select and Start, the podcast about meaningful and memorable video games. I'm your host, Keifer, and every episode I bring on a guest who selects a game that made an impact on their life. I have a wonderful guest with me today. They are an artist and someone I'm very excited to talk to today about a game that means so much to me. It is momopatchi. Momo, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. Nobody has been so brave as to just say like, hey, I want to talk about the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. So when our mutual contact and friend, Avry, my best friend and roommate, said that you were interested in talking about Ocarina of Time, I was like, yes, hell yeah, let's talk about one of my favorite games ever. But before we get into that, I would like the audience to get to know you a little bit. What do you do and what do you like?
Okay, what do? I am currently enrolled here in Savannah at the Savannah College of Art and Design. I'm an artist, animator, illustrator, kind of a generalist. That's kind of how the field goes. Like, unfortunately, if you want to do something in animation, you're gonna have to do everything in it. But it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm from Oahu, so this is my first time living in the mainland and just being around all these types of people, all different new types of people, and also this new climate. I really like it here. I didn't know that I would find like community and stuff. And this opportunity to be on this podcast was kind of serendipitous. I didn't know that you were roommates as best friends with Avry. I was just like, oh, I saw you posted this person's podcast. I'm like, you should be on it. So I'm glad that I got the opportunity, especially to talk about something so monumentous.
Great point about you wearing a lot of hats as somebody who's working in the art world. What kind of art do you draw?
Very character focused. I'm pursuing a 2D character animation degree, so a lot of making things move, but particularly people. So that gets into acting, that gets into design, that gets into color, story, all that kind of stuff. So I have a focus on, at least in my portfolio, I noticed, and also how people interpret my art is like very cutesy, very bright, but kind of robust. Like I care very much about form, but also a lot about color. So there's like, I know I get this comment a lot, which is it's just so specific, but it comes up so often. Like your art is very edible. Like, it has this like chunky, maybe like gummy quality to it. Yeah, and I guess that plays into a lot of my tastes and what I find appealing, and especially this game. Fantastic art. Oh my goodness.
It's like that one Kirby game that's like Kirby is shaped like a friend. That's kind of what your art
Mhm.
evokes for me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Very friendly.
Yeah. Friendly Kirby art. It's good. I'm very excited to talk to you about the artistic process and everything like that. But I want to get a sense of your taste first. This is a video game podcast after all.
Mm.
There is no community that likes to gatekeep more than the gamers. So we're gonna have to check your credentials here at the top. Let's talk about your history with gaming, who or what got you into it, your relationship with throughout the years, and so on. What is Momo's portrait of a gamer?
Mm. Well, I definitely inherited a lot of my taste and a lot of my physical consoles, games, cartridges from my father. He was a huge gamer, which is funny to say. And I feel like when I talk to other people about like parents engaging with video games, it was either not allowed or their fathers were like the COD fathers or the Halo fathers. And my dad kind of was like that towards the end of our relationship. But I think the first game I remember watching him play was Blue Dragon, kind of like a sleeper. I remember thinking about it. I was like, he was playing like a Dragon Quest game. I was like, no, he's playing Blue Dragon. Holy crap!
Yeah, close enough too, because it's like same artist, Akira Toriyama, doing the art for both.
Yeah, so I inherited his N64 and Game Boy, and then I don't know, the N64 was bigger than the Game Boy, so I was like, oh, I'll play this one, and that kind of set me off on my path. And I had a lot of siblings. We didn't all get into games, so whatever he played, he would just hand on to me. And that was a lot of my exposure, and he was super duper into that like JRPG fantasy type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So started with Ocarina of Time, and then we got a Wii, and then the DS, and all that kind of stuff. So really, yeah, just my dad, I guess. I didn't have a lot of people my age that were into the things that I was into. So I grew up in a very like active community, active small community. So I didn't really have people to talk to with it. So it was just me and my dad. And I remember him like sitting me down when I was playing the Ocarina of Time and like showing me a game fact with like the ASCII like title on it with like the type font. Very, very cool. So very old school, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, that's not uncommon to hear people be influenced by their parents. In my case, I was taking my taste from my older brothers. But this, generation, the late millennials, early Gen Z, they're people who have parents that actually do have a background with video games. But it's very funny hearing that, it makes sense that he was into Japanese RPGs if he was playing fucking Blue Dragon, like the one JRPG released for the Xbox.
Right?
Yeah.
And I guess it makes sense. And I think that was his attempt to also like indulge my interest in, because I'm biracial. My father is black and my mother is Japanese Okinawan. So I think he was trying to like give me that cool, because he would give me all his Dragon Ball CDs. He's like, "Oh, you'd like this." I'm like, "Okay." Like, taste is inherently like genetic, but it was very, very cool, and I'm glad I did get to grow up on that kind of stuff because it really like curated my taste going forward. Yeah, I didn't have any older siblings that were into video games. Like, I do have older siblings, but they were kind of like more into what was going. I remember my older sister was like really, really into Twilight, and I wanted her to play a Wii game with me. And she's like, "No, I'm gonna go see the new movie." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Not a lot of great Twilight video games to like bond over.
Mm-mm.
No. You grew up with playing Nintendo 64, the Game Boy, and then you sort of talked about like getting into 3DS and all that. What would you say your favorite console overall is?
I think for the age that I was and just the sheer volume of the catalog is definitely it's kind of like a tie between the Wii and also the DSi, but I think I'm leaning more towards the DSi just purely
Mhm.
for how portable and also the kind of physically intimate it was, just like holding it close to you at all times.
Mhm.
The classic like hiding it under your pillow and your mom comes in the room like you're not supposed to be playing. Definitely
Yeah.
the DSi.
Yeah. The sneakiest console.
Hmm.
You're an artist. Did you ever mess around with the Flipnote Studios on the DSi?
Oh yes, 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 yes. That definitely steered me on the path towards animation. I didn't know that could be a career. I just thought that was like a fun thing that you could do for fun, and that
Hmm.
animation was like made by I don't know, like super geniuses and computers. I didn't know what went into it because I feel like all artists growing up, not all, but for the most part, people's idea of what a career in the arts is just like putting things in a gallery and that's it. So I didn't think that I could take that and move it forward, but I was on the Hatena like downloading stuff when I learned how to connect to the internet. I was making things myself. I was like recording my siblings saying things and animating over it. Very, very fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, like that's a very good point about how this one application that was free to use sort of deconstructs animation to a place where anybody can get into it because it's just a series of frames. You just draw one frame and then the next frame, and then you just post the results online. And a lot of it's crude and a lot of it's hyper detailed. And there's like just a community built around just this one exact thing. And that feels very simple now when everything is an everything app. There's just like this one thing dedicated to this one purpose that anybody can get into because of their shared console that they all have. It's just so funny. It was the DS of all things that, got so many people in animation.
Yeah, it's such a great multi-tool. I think the catalog was insane, and especially for drawing too. There's so many drawing games. One of my favorite games in the DS was Drawn to Life, and then Drawn to Life, the sequel. I forgot what it was called.
I think it was literally called like Drawn to Life: The Next Chapter.
The next chapter, yes, thank you. And all the
Yeah.
crazy stuff that happened in that one. I think that's why also it's my favorite console, just the sheer limitation of what it could do. Like I love the Wii, but I don't know. As someone who values art direction so much, there's so much great, fantastic, beautiful sprite art in that game that really compelled me to understand, or at least to think about. I think that was the first time I ever looked up like artists on a game. I was playing like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon or something, and I was like, who drew like the little talk sprites and stuff like that?
Mhm.
And that's something I never thought of before. That oh my god, someone had to draw the things that they had to model to put in the game, or draw them and sprite over them. Yeah, just really made me think about art and game making.
No, I mean that's wonderful that your relationship with art is actually like intertwined with video games. This it makes that discussion very easy, but also like it's this really like touching thing. I mean, video games are an art form, and this is something that's not as controversial to say anymore. But like the idea that
Mhm.
this is able to get people, inspire people, and like put people into an artistic direction is an argument alone that it is art because it's putting people on that path to artistry. I mean, that's just exemplified by you. You mentioned Mystery Dungeon, and I noticed that your art is very Pokemon forward, the stuff that you
Mhm.
post online. Would you say Pokemon is one of your favorite games ever, or that
I
series?
think so. It's one of the big franchises that I think really inspired me, like holistically, like in every part of my life, like the people that I met, the friends that I kept, its design philosophy, and something that is always changing. It's not often you can consistently, well, I was going to say, have the involved with the franchise that's consistently good, because I know Pokemon is like a dime flip. You talk to someone, it's like, well, original 150, and then you talk to someone who's like, well, this game is bad, and then a year passes, we're like, well, this new one's even worse, so this last one wasn't that bad. But like to consistently grow up with something, quote unquote, and to see how it affects like different parts of your life. There's like this time capsule system where you go back and put in a cartridge and you see all the nicknames of all your Pokemon and all like things that you gravitated towards, and like sometimes your favorite Pokemon will change. And I feel like that's kind of come through in my art recently, because I used to never draw Pokemon. I think only like maybe a year or two ago I did, because I really saw how it affected me, like one, in terms of its design, what it meant to people, what it means to me, and how I know there's such an insane visual catalog of Pokemon. If I were to ask for someone for their top 50 and then compare it to my top 50, you can like pick out like the different elements. I think that's what I appreciate about it the most is visualization of what a person loves. Like sometimes someone's career is just like legendaries, and someone's like, I just like the pink ones. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. I just think they're neat to the world. Like, my favorite Pokemon is Ampharos, which not a competitive Pokemon, as I understand it, but that's... I love that guy. He's just Ampharos. I have a Flaffy and an Ampharos plush over there in my bookcase. I literally just think he's neat. I like that he can learn Thunder Punch even though he doesn't really have good arms. It's great.
Yeah, that definitely is something that had got me thinking about it recently too, because coinciding with, I think, my more active relationship with Pokemon was it's not like it didn't exist, but the more mainstream and active VGC community, where it's like I have friends who are making jokes about stat moves or abilities or like doubles. I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's back again. And having to also grapple with like utilitarian purposes of Pokemon rather than appeal, because sometimes those cross web so much, especially in gaming spaces, where like sometimes things aren't deliberately designed to be good. They're just there because you like it. And it's something that I felt like a lot of conflict. Like someone will pull out a tier list in my friend group. I'm like, oh no, we're gonna see like which ice type is truly the best ice type. I'm like, guys, it's Snom. It's a little caterpillar. I don't make the rules. I don't care that he's like 4x weak to fire, whatever.
Right. Like, I think Snorunt is cool, and that's why I like Snorunt. I'm not here for the meta. I'm here for aesthetics, and I like variety. But some people are into it for the competitive aspect of it, and it's such a versatile franchise, and that contributes to why it is literally the highest grossing media franchise of all time. I know people who literally only engage with Pokemon Go, have never watched the anime, have never played any of the games. They're literally just Pokemon Go players, and they're dedicated Pokemon Go players. Recently, the trading card game app came out, and people are just all over that trading card game. People who've never messed with the real card game before ever just like love that loop of being able to open a pack and seeing the little art that was so appealing to people who were just doing that over lockdown. It's very good at sowing seeds for different types of minds. That's like its evil appeal that is also brilliant.
Yeah, that is like, I think that is what deeply touches me about it, because I know my mom will be like, oh, I like that Clobbopus that you drew. I'm like, how do you know that? I'm like, that's Gen 8, Mom. Like, I'm so glad that you remember that that's my favorite Pokemon. But like, she's still keenly aware of like what it is. She can like see a Pokemon, or she'll see something that has like kind of cutesy, organic design sets. It's like, oh, is that a Pokemon? Stuff like that. Like, it has that household appeal.
Yeah. That's the thing that makes it difficult for Pokemon imitators to pop up, is because like when you see a design, it is so distinctly like a Pokemon. That's like Digimon have to be a little ugly, or a little like like they have to start a little ugly or a little like misshapen and then evolve into like these weird humanoid things, because those are the two textures Pokemon doesn't really touch. But everything else is like, that's a Pokemon. Like, I don't know what Pokemon is, but that feels like a Pokemon. It's like the pornography rule. I can't describe it. I know it when I see it. That's Pokemon.
Pornography rule.
Yes. Pornographon. Really quickly, what is your favorite Pokemon game?
Of the mainline games?
Anything. You can mention anything. You mentioned Mystery Dungeon. That could be your favorite.
Yeah, oh gosh, because it's like there's like so many different flavors. I think I'm like so not a favorites guy. I'm like a top 3 all-time guy.
Go for it.
Like, of the mainline, it's probably a tie between Black and White 2 and Alpha Sapphire. I think that's a really, really powerful remaster And Black and White too is just, I think that's what people consider like not modern Pokemon, like the pre-transition to 3D. I think that's where some people cut it off. Some people cut it off at Diamond and Pearl, Platinum. Black and White too, phenomenal. I love the sprite work. I love that gen. I know in retrospect, some people always crap on the object mons, but I'm like so tied to Gen 5 because they also had a phenomenal spin-off, the Wonder Park games, Poke Park Wonder Park 2, or Poke Park Wonders Beyond.
Wow, yeah.
It's a fantastic game. I love it so much. I'd play it more if I had a Wii, and also if I didn't have to like shake my controller every 5 seconds. If it had a port to the Switch, I'd be on it. If they can make it $100, I'd be on it. And of the sideline games, I guess I'd branch this off into another category. Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Olmia, fantastic game. Really, really ties me to Gen 4. I love the mechanic of like capturing Pokemon, but also how they like are incorporated into the world more, much less of the turn-based battle system and more of like how I would imagine, like everyone has their ideal Pokemon game and they're kind of all coalescing as they make more, but the more companion aspect of it where Pokemon kind of just like have jobs or do things that are natural to them as an animal. And then, yeah, the Pokemon Mystery Dungeons. And I guess my favorite out of those would be Blue, because I think I got that. And then I also had the companion like manga that came with it that comes out like the adventure books, but that was for the side game. And I really like that one because that one is less kind of like bureaucratic. Like when in the other ones like Sky and Darkness, you're with a guild and you're like, oh, this actually everything's all messed up and you're evil. But that one was more of you're a Pokemon that was a human and you're living in a town. And the conflict is more rumor based, like community based, like seeding the seed of doubt within a community and myth and folklore. I think that's really cool. And also you get a house that looks like your head, which is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very thoughtful answer that ended in a very primal note, but I agree. I never really thought about how much more community oriented Red and Blue are versus Mystery Dungeon Red and Blue Rescue Team versus Explorers of was it Time and Darkness and in Sky?
A Sky.
Because I really like the guild layout, and I like that you sleep in the side of a mountain. And
Sharpedo Mountain, one of the best video game locations of all time. Like so cool.
It's great.
Or
but
Sharpedo Bluff.
Yeah, but you raise a good, excellent point there about like the more community-driven aspect of it, because it's just like everybody's doing their own thing, and your job is just the person that goes out and surveys and interacts with shit, and then like you come back and it's like I'm the banker, I'm Mr. Meowth, I run the bank, and that kind of thing.
It's like, oh, you want to learn some moves? I'm like, no, I'm good, thank you.
I do remember because I remember getting a DS like the Christmas of 2006. Yes. It was like the DS Lite, and the two games we got for it, like my little brother got New Super Mario Brothers, and I got Yoshi's Island DS, and we both got Blue Rescue Team. And I remember beating Blue Rescue Team and sort of like gripping the table I was sitting on, like crying. It's like, why is Pokemon making me cry? What the hell? So yeah, good answer there.
Oh, thank you for asking.
Pokemon is a thing that you can sustain an entire podcast about on its own because there's so many things to talk about and so many different reasons to appreciate it. So let's try and like get out of that hole a little bit and talk about some other video games that you like. Let's talk something more recent. What have you been playing lately?
Lately? Oh, wow. Lately, I haven't been very much playing any new games or anything that's new. I've been more kind of like going back to old games because now that I'm a senior, my time is a little bit tied up. And I can't play any clicker games. Oh gosh, because I would just idle those all the time. But, I bought a game 2 days ago because everything's on sale right now. I bought both of the Katamari re-rolls that are on Steam right now, and I've just been playing through them without a controller, which is like kind of a pain because tank controls converted to a keyboard setup is nightmarish. But a lot of fun. I love the music in that game. I love the visuals and how, I know, Kishi, it's like so over the top in what it is that there can only be one Katamari Damacy, or that type of visual language. So cool.
It's so distinct and lovely and great, and God bless you for trying to play that thing on anything other than a PlayStation 2 controller like the original game was. I played it on the Switch and I was like, what? I don't know about that, but you're powering through it in the name of art, so Godspeed to you. I've been playing Dave the Diver recently, and there
Oh,
was an update to that. It's like an everything game. I was surprised that every like 2 days in the game, it throws a new mechanic at you, and I'm like, I just got obsessed with this thing, and now you're throwing farming at me. And then there was an update that came out while I was playing the game where they added a side mission where you play Balatro with
oh
people.
wow.
And then I was like, I gotta check out this Balatro. And a friend gifted me Balatro, my buddy Scott. And I had to uninstall Balatro because I got like 50 hours of Balatro in 2 weeks. And that wasn't good. It's not healthy.
Mm.
I figured out how to make Steam Cloud work on my phone. That's how into Balatro I was. I was playing it on my phone. And once you do that, it's so fucking over, guys. Anyway, it's earned its nomination for Game of the Year at the Game Awards for whatever that's worth. It destroyed my life momentarily there during a very emotionally heavy 2 weeks after the beginning of November. So that's what I've been playing lately. I wanted to, like, we're going to be talking about Zelda shortly soon. What are some other Momo core video games to you?
Momoko. I was just looking at my topster so I would remember.
I'm the same way. I have to look at Letterboxd to remember what movies I like.
I was like, man, whatever. Like, it's always comes to that. It's like someone asks you what you like, and I was like, I don't think I've ever liked any piece of media ever or engaged with it. I just can't recall. But a big one. I'll give you like a mini list. A big one. Plants vs Zombies. Oh my goodness, that is such a Momocore game. I'm so married to that format of tower defense, and I think I wouldn't say it's flawless, but it's so, I wouldn't call it like insanely unique, but for the time, as my introduction to tower defense, and also like how creative and how fun it can be. It has an almanac, so every creature and everything that you interact with has a story and has a personality. Like, it's so effortlessly stylish in execution, soundtrack, and art style. Love that game so much. Just like collecting friends. I think that's a big thing in all the games that I play, just having a really, really vibrant ensemble and just like bringing them together. Another game I would say is Momocore. It's like a Wii game called The Munchables. And
The
I don't know,
Munchables.
The Munchables. It amazing art style. And again, another cast of characters. Well, there's two playable characters, but every enemy that you interact with, they're like these space pirates. But your two main characters are these like very hungry little animals. But all the pirates just so happen to look like fruits and vegetables. So it's like this whole cast of characters. They all have personalities, and like you're eating them, and all the bosses have like these really interesting designs. Just very cutesy, and it kind of has that non-diegetic, like Super Paper Mario thing. Like all of the cutscenes are paper cutout and like crafty. So like really interesting
Oh, yeah, no, this looks
design.
really cute.
Yeah, really fun, really cute. But I didn't even know who made it. Like I can't
Namco
even.
Bandai.
Oh, okay, yeah, but that is like long abandoned. I'm always like hoping like maybe they'll bring him back for like a Monkey Ball collab or something. I don't know.
Okay. It's a Now Production who
Mm.
developed Adventure Island 2 and 3 on the NES. What else did they do? Uh let's find something from this generation or something. Um they did Sonic Riders.
Oh wow.
Like
Okay.
they co-developed Sonic Riders with Sonic Team. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to see because they do a lot of ports and it's like, did they do this or did somebody else do this?
Mm.
What an interesting thing. Bakugan Battle Brawlers on the PlayStation 3.
Okay.
Mario Super Sluggers. They worked on Mario Super Sluggers. They do a lot of baseball games. I saw like One Piece Baseball on here. It's like you call this company if you really want a baseball game, or weirdly, this game called the Munchables, known as Tabamon in Japan.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. There are like they say that phrase a lot, and I was like, what does that mean? But I guess it was localized differently to be more advertisable.
Yeah, which is weird because Munchables sounds like some like a Mr. Beast ripoff version of
The
Lunchables,
Munchables.
and Tabamon just rolls off the tongue really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So other Momo core games.
Petz Dogs 2 for the Wii, another Wii game. I remember playing Petz like Nintendogs on the DS, but the Petz company was completely different. I saw this advertised like on the back of a highlights magazine when you still had like kids subscriptions to magazine. And it's this like surprisingly I wouldn't say emotional, like kind of dark, at least for like a children's game. Just like RPG adventure where you're just this little dog or a cat. The cat and the dog games are the same. You just like are different. You can choose to be a cat or a dog. Everything's the same. All the NPCs just the same. They just swap the models. But you're a dog on an island, and there's this magic hat, and there's a wolf. I think his name is Wolfred or something like that, or Ifred or something like that. And he like tricks you into giving him this magic hat. So he's this evil wolf, and he's wearing this. The hat goes from like rainbow and magical, and then he puts it on, and it becomes like thunder clouds, and it's evil. He turns the hat evil, so you have to like travel. I think your best friend also gets kidnapped by him, so you have to travel the dog world, and you're like a dog, and you have to like sniff things, find things. You have to put outfits on. It's really really cute, but you can get attacked by bears. You get attacked by snakes. There's alligators, and you see these Komodo dragons. It's like really scary. At least to a kid.
Because I've seen screenshots of the game, and it's like it's Petz Dogz too, where it's like a literal real life render of a dog on the cover, and then it's just like little cutesy chibi models of like dogs in the game, right? You're telling me there's like this magical aspect to it, and also like you can be attacked by a bear.
Yeah, it's not like what is it, Revenant or anything where it like mauls you, but like it's also a stealth game, which is really surprising. There's like huge stealth elements to it. Like you learn how to sneak, you learn how to like bark, howl, like you have to distract enemies to get around them. And it's one of those games where you like encounter obstacles in World 1 that you won't be able to interact with till World 4. So then the more that you go around the world, like the world becomes bigger, the more you explore it, even in the places you've already been. It's very, very cool.
This entire time I thought it was like a Nintendogs derivative, and you're telling me it's maybe an RPG, an adventure game, I think.
Right? It's like, yeah, there's no turn-based elements to it, but like, yeah, you do eventually learn, instead of being like, you become empowered through your journey, you can start like attacking things back, or just like barking at them, then they take little emoticon damage, their smiley face goes to like a frowny face or something. And you can fish in this game. It's so fun. Like the sniffing mechanic I found really fun because it has good sound design. The music in that game's fantastic. Oh my goodness. This really fun tropical, even though you're dogs, you're kind of living on this self-sustained dog island. And it's one of those games where like a town is ravaged, but the more that you quest, like the more you build the town up. So I think there's like an aquarium, and there's a tailor or someone who runs the inventory store. So you can go, like if you bring me 12 grapes, oh wait, dogs shouldn't eat grapes. If you bring me 12 apples, I'll make you this hat, and this hat increases your health or does this or does this. It's really fun, but it's one of those games where I know if I were to play it as I'm older, like one, I'd probably just be bored by how motion intensive it is, because you have to like shake to dig things out of the ground. I think it was also a nunchuck game, so I don't know how I'd feel about that. But yeah,
it looks like it was on the PlayStation 2 as well, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and
maybe
the
I'll
PC.
pick up a copy. Oh,
yeah.
I would definitely play a PC version.
So it sounds like you like video games that are vaguely like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, but with different art styles.
Yeah.
Because this sounds like you're describing Mystery Dungeon, but instead it's with literal, like, there's a Shiba Inu there instead of Squirtle.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said before, like ensemble motivated games. I think what's really interests me, especially in fantasy, because like there's different classes, different species, and just like so many bright colors, like appealing to a younger audience. But oftentimes there's those transitional elements where the story does get like a little intense, and you're not used to that. It's not just like I used to play a lot of Flash games, and that was like. I was like, oh, all video games are free. I just play them on my computer, but they were very contained. And you just do one thing, and there's no like narrative progression or steep. And then the real video games, like not real, those are real video games, but games that are meant to be played in a longer, like larger span. There's like so many twists and turns, and there's so many tone shifts. It's like, holy crap, this is so much fun. Yeah, very drawn to those things.
Like I'm remembering Drawn to Life. I remember like my brother had the Drawn to Life games, and like he showed me the credits of Drawn to Life the next chapter, because he was like, look at what they did. And it's like, this, I think it's implied like spoilers for Drawn to Life the next chapter for the next 30 seconds, I guess. The kid was in a coma the entire time, and this entire series was like what this kid was like thinking of in his coma state, because he got in a car accident, and that's what the big reveal is during the credits. And you watch.
Yeah. You find out that like the girl from the first game, who's like she's like half a shadow monster, is his sister, who is like probably brutally like disfigured from the accident. Like her face in the game or her face in the real world when he wakes up is bandaged, and both of their parents are gone. And it's insane. Like what an insane tone shift that kind of came out of nowhere, and especially in the second game because it kind of primes you for that like very catastrophic ending because like the main character or like one of the main characters, Mary, she's her father passes away in the previous game, and then she just like suddenly turns to the dark side. And everyone's like, no, 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 she's just being brainwashed. She would never turn to the dark side. But you find out she's like she kind of understands what's happening. She knows that she's like just a figment of someone's imagination and waking up the kid. She knows it's for the greater good of him, but doesn't want to abandon her people. It's so bizarre for like for a game to turn around that way. And I guess in some ways it was the studio kind of like giving up the ghost. But I was like, I'm 12 and I like to draw. What the heck?
Literally, that's why my little brother was 11 years old and he's like, I just like to draw. And then he's like, what is this? And he's like, not like confused, but he's just like literally like gawking, like, look at what my game did. And I'm like, what have you been playing this entire time?
Right? And it's just like such an insane dose of reality because none of the music in the previous game, and for the most part, none of the music in the second game, except for one character cutscene, not even cutscene, there's like no human dialogue, no speech, no music. Then it cuts to this cutscene and she's singing. She's like a real person just singing this song. So it's like it feels like you just watched a movie. It's like Titanic, and Celine Dion like pulls up. I'm like, whoa.
Kind of Evangelion shit are they putting in these E-rated video games? What are some other Momocore games?
WarioWare Smooth Moves, another Wii game. I know that I said DS was my favorite. Another Wii game that was really, really interesting. Another cast of characters that's a lot of fun. And I had never played a game like that, like the micro game. That was my first WarioWare game, where it was like the purpose of the game was to play a bunch of fast-paced, like, what is it called? Like muscle memory things. And that was the one where they called it the form baton. Like the Wii remote was called the form baton, so there's a bunch of different forms. So there'd be a game where you'd have to like hold the Wii like between your fists, like upright, or ones where you have to set it down and wait for something on the screen to happen. You pick up the Wii remote, or like use it like a sword. It was so much fun, and really good music too. And all the characters are really cute. I love, and also just how interesting that exterior or like that extraneous Mario design world is, because it's still like technically in the Mario universe because it's Wario, but it's like you would never see like Penny the scientist in a mainland Mario game. It's like these exclusionary zones. Have you played a WarioWare game?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's Mario Party for people with ADHD. Like I respect the ethos of those games a lot. I don't know, like if Mario's like the Disney Channel, then WarioWare is like the Cartoon Network, you know? Like that's the kind of vibe of it. Like this more like kind of edgy, more out there art style with a more crude sense of humor, that kind of thing. I just really like how it has like this very anarchic just vibe to it. I like it.
Yeah, very kind of irreverent sometimes. I feel like it's very within. Like you said, very crude and kind of things that you wouldn't expect to be in the Nintendo catalog. And I think I got the recent or the second to last one that they made, the WarioWare for the Switch, but not the most recent one because I think that one's Shake It Up. It was one before that. And that was a lot of fun, but I remember feeling like, oh, I can start to feel like the Nintendo sanitization coming, where it's like they kind of like paring down and like smoothing the edges of certain characters. They're kind of like more reserved or a bit more sweet and less mean-spirited. Because I kind of liked how kind of raunchy and rude Wario was. He's like, I love exploiting my friends as game developers, or like I eat garlic and I'm stinky. Now he's kind of like, I'm your funny uncle who like shows up sometimes and does funny things, which is still a lot of fun. But I think I was used to that. Like, there's like a game in the WarioWare Smooth Moves, the Wii one, where you like have to like smack your butt, and like which is so funny and obtuse. Or you like pluck someone's nose hairs. But I don't know. Things are changing.
Guess they're making Wario fucking woke now. I guess God. I don't know.
You can't play Wario games in 2024.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's also funny that like so many of your like Momo core games are Wii focused, and every single time you're like, I hate motion control. By the way,
Well, I think it's just because like I'm so used to. Well, I guess for the last Momocore game, I will say a DS game, but I am just used to like. I think I like that feeling more of like laying down or sitting down and holding something close to you, and I think also the two screens is really cool, like how gameplay is like divides between the two. I guess like the final Momocore games that are actually on the DS would be Fossil Fighters and Kirby Superstar Ultra. That those are such tight. Well, I guess Fossil Fighters isn't really a tight game. It's a very interesting and unique game, but the story is like all over the place.
yeah,
And yeah, it's all over the place. But the gameplay loop is really fun. Superstar Ultra is just like I think that was my introduction to Kirby. And that was the first Kirby game I played, so I didn't know that they were like remastering and remaking, putting it together. But I don't know, being able to play like the cave. What is it called? Like the Great Cave. What is I don't remember.
it's like the Great Cave Adventure, Great Cave of Wonder, or something like that. No, Cave of Wonders is Aladdin, I think.
But like finding all the treasures.
Great Cave Offensive.
Great Cave Offensive, thank you. Like being able to find all those treasures and like the sprite art in that game, the one enemy would terrify me, but it's such a cool design. The lobster thing that you'd fight in the Great Cave Offensive, and also learning his copy ability. I think Kirby acts and plays and lives in this world that no other game that really has, where it does have that kind of weird cosmic edge where it's like, yeah, Kirby can do all these things, but also you like fight gods and your friends turn to the weird monsters and stuff like that. But then also you can race King Dedede in the Great Gourmet Race and just like eat food and have fun and play, and you're pink. I'm like, oh, I love being pink. Thank you. Really phenomenal games.
Yeah. Superstar Ultra is like a very good introduction into like the vibe of Kirby, because it like within the game itself, it's like, oh, Kirby can be anything. Kirby's shaped like a friend. Kirby can also, kill God. What do you like? Yeah, I remember that was a game I had on the DS and played quite a bit. Yeah, and then Fossil Fighters I also played too. I think my like stepbrother had that one, and I played around with it a little bit, and I was like, oh, it's like Pokemon, but with literally dinosaurs. I think it had like a rock, paper, scissors kind of fighting system, something like that.
Yeah, because there was elements, but then also you had that like rotation. I don't know. I never remember how it works outside of playing it. Every time I play it, I feel like I have to relearn it because it's like nothing I've ever played before, and it's kind of cool. I like the strategy of it because it was so much more in tune with that defensive element of strategy games, where I feel like Pokemon as like a solitary game when you play by yourself, it's like purely offensive and you're not incentivized to learn anything that doesn't strictly lower someone's HP stat, but like rather in like VGC where it is like duos is a very strategy heavy. Fossil Fighters is like, okay, so I'm going to sink my Stegosaurus back, push Carnotaurus forward, and the next turn he's going to rotate to dodge this attack. It's so interesting. And then they're just so cool. Like, that is one of the... I love the biological, like, up-to-date, most recent speculative reconstructions of T-Rex, but T-Rex covered in flames with a mohawk is so badass. Like, I can't get over it. Like, I don't care how inaccurate it is. It's so cool.
I'm not here to learn. I'm here to fight a dinosaurs. That's... Like, what is that? Like one Spider-Man comic panel people always like repost. Like, I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs. That's that game.
Dinosaurs are cool.
Yeah, like I remember I really liked the underground, like the Grand Underground stuff in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. And I kind of wanted a whole game like that. And Fossil Fighters did that a little bit because you went to dig sites and everything and got fossils and things out of the ground. But mainly it was fighting dinosaurs. And that's also pretty cool. Like, you got me there. I remember having fun with that game.
Yeah, I love that digging mechanic, or like the paleontology aspect of it, where you have to like chisel or hammer. Like, there's sometimes I remember where my mom's like, we have to go, you have to get ready, you have to go, and I just would hammer it, destroy the fossil, just completely ruin it. And my Venusaur would come out with like a 12% success rate. I'm like, oh, sorry, you're stupid, but I'm in a rush, I have to save.
I'm sorry, I ruined your life.
Like, oh, sorry, I know like you're missing your like orbital socket, but we gotta go. We gotta start fighting.
Mom says I can't play anymore, so this is your life now. Yeah, so we've covered the Momo core games, a lot of DS and Wii games with weird dark undertones, or also a dinosaur fighting another dinosaur. It's time for us to get into the main event, the game that we ultimately settled on, a game that's been a long time in the making. I was worried I wasn't going to be able to cover a Zelda game this year, and this opportunity came up, and it's like, okay, let's do it. Let's talk about a game that has absolutely no baggage whatsoever. It's only the most critically acclaimed video game of all time. It's the video game that comes up in the discussions of what the greatest video games of all time are. Let's talk about The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is an action-adventure game developed and published by Nintendo. This is the first 3D Legend of Zelda game, and it is the 5th Zelda game I have covered on this show. Previously, I've covered A Link to the Past with Tom Holzerman. I did Breath of the Wild with Emily from My Brother, My Captain, My Podcast. I did Wind Waker with graphic novelist Hamish Steele. And I covered Majora's Mask with TV writer Jameson Borak. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was developed concurrently with Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart 64 by Nintendo's Entertainment Analysis and Development Division, more commonly known as Nintendo EAD. Ocarina of Time was such a large title, it would come out much later than these two titles. Super Mario 64 was a launch title, and Mario Kart 64 came out in 1997. This game would come out late in 1998. Over 120 people were involved in the production of this game, and while we cannot name everybody involved, I wanted to shout out a few notable figures. Zelda and Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto served as the game's producer and supervisor. Yoichi Yamada and Eiji Aonuma served as the game system directors. This is not the first time Eiji Aonuma in particular has come up on the show. He's basically president of Zelda games now. He's the general producer for the Zelda games. He was the co-director for Majora's Mask. He directed The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. He is very much part of the identity of 3D Zelda games, and this was the game where he first started in the director role for these games, and he did that alongside Yuichi Yamada, who was also the game system director. Toshio Iwawaka was the programming director. I'm sure most listeners are quite aware of the gameplay of the Zelda series. This is one that is heavily building off of the gameplay of A Link to the Past, but now in a 3D environment. The new features of this game are largely a reaction to the 3D space they're working in. For example, the first person aiming for items like the hookshot and the bow. Lock-on, called Z-targeting in this game, was also introduced here. The titular Ocarina of Time is also central to this video game. This is brand new. There was an ocarina in A Link to the Past, but you were not able to play it as an instrument in the way that you're able to in this game. So playing certain songs that are taught to Link are able to affect the world in some way. There is a sun song that will change day into night and vice versa. There's a song of storms that will make it rain. There are songs you can play to teleport various locations in the game. A very crucial part of this game's identity and something brand new to the series that was introduced here. Music is a very, very core part of the Zelda series, and it is a lot more interactive here. And the god, Koji Kondo, who is the Mario and Zelda composer himself, possibly the most famous video game composer of all time, he returned to score The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This would be the last Zelda title that Koji Kondo would be the sole credited composer for. Rest assured, we will spend quite a lot of time talking about the music of this game throughout the episode, as it is, again, a very core part of this game's identity. Yoshiaki Koizumi served as the 3D system director and character designer for this game. Astute listeners of the show will remember this name, as he co-directed The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask, and he was also the director of Super Mario Galaxy, both of which I've previously covered on the show. He is someone I've really come to admire over the course of making Select and Start. As character designer for this game, he created the designs for Link and Epona, the horse that you are able to ride on. This is also the first Zelda game where you're able to ride a horse. Koizumi also implemented the Z-targeting system, the game's lock-on system, as mentioned before. Originally, the lock-on was supposed to be a simple triangle, but Koizumi came up with the idea to change it to a fairy, so it was more part of the actual experience, something that Link was visualizing, rather than just this robotic, impersonal polygon on a screen showing what you're locked onto. During the development, the mechanic was called the Fairy Navigation System and nicknamed Navi. which would lay the groundwork for the character Navi, whose presence helped steer the story of Ocarina of Time. Koizumi also helped with visualizing the combat. He and a couple of other developers would see these, would go to a show where there was like ninjas fighting a samurai, and he was like noticing like, hey, only one of these samurai is attacking, only one of these ninjas will be attacking the samurai at a time, and then the others lay in the background. And that sort of helped develop the pacing of combat, where even if you're fighting multiple enemies at once, such as the Stalfos, you'll notice only one of them is attacking you at a time, but that danger is still present because you're being surrounded and overwhelmed. So he helped contribute to that idea too. Toru Osawa was the game's script director, building off of story ideas given to him by Miyamoto and Koizumi. Kensuke Tanabe, who was scenario writer for A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, provided script support here. As for the game's story, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time begins in a magical forest in Hyrule, where magical beings called the Kokiri live as children forever. The Great Deku Tree bestows a guardian fairy to all Kokiri children, save for one child, Link, who has never quite fit in among the Kokiri. Link is also plagued by nightmares of a man in black pursuing a young princess on horseback. On one fateful day, the Great Deku Tree sends the blue fairy Navi to be Link's companion, summoning him to face a test of courage. Link is to enter the Deku Tree and lift the curse that was placed on him by a wicked man. Though Link is able to defeat the parasitic curse inside of him, the Deku Tree knows his own death is imminent, and uses his dying moments to give Link the Kokiri's emerald and tells him to leave the forest and go to Hyrule Castle to meet the young princess he sees in his dreams. Link sets out into the world, eventually arriving at Hyrule Castle, sneaking past the guards in order to meet Princess Zelda. They meet in the courtyard, where she instantly recognizes him from her prophetic dreams. She tells him that Ganondorf, the king from the Gerudo Desert presently swearing fealty to her father, has wicked intentions. Ganondorf is looking to steal the power of the ancient goddesses, the Triforce. Whoever seeks the Triforce would require 3 sacred stones, as well as the Ocarina of Time, in order to open the sealed door of the Temple of Time. Zelda entreats Link to find the remaining 2 sacred stones before Ganondorf does. Link travels to the Goron City and Zora's Domain, lifting the curses placed on them by Ganondorf. As thanks, he is given their sacred stones. But upon his return to Hyrule Castle, he sees the visions of his nightmare come to life as Ganondorf pursues Zelda on horseback to steal the Ocarina of Time from her. As Zelda passes Link, she tosses the ocarina into the moat behind him. Ganondorf pursues her, blasting Link aside as he continues his pursuit, ignorant of the true location of the ocarina. Link arrives at the Temple of Time. He places a stone in their pedestal and plays the song to open the door of time. The door opens to reveal the Sword of Evil's Bane, the Master Sword. Link is able to draw the sword from the pedestal, but finds himself sealed in the sacred realm. Ganondorf suddenly appears, mocking Link for leading him to the Triforce. Link suddenly awakens, having grown from a young boy into a young man. An ancient sage, Rauru, informs Link that only the hero of time could pull the Master Sword from the pedestal, but since he was too young for such a title, he was sealed away for 7 years. Rauru tells Link that in the intervening years that Ganondorf has taken the Triforce and used that power to make Hyrule a land of darkness. He urges Link to awaken the other 5 sages needed to seal away Ganondorf's evil. Link, now grown, sets out into a future ruled by the evil King Ganondorf to save both the past and the future. Time-based shenanigans ensue. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was released for the Nintendo 64 on November 23, 1998. Other games released in 1998 include The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening DX, Baldur's Gate, Banjo-Kazooie, Fallout 2, Grim Fandango, Half-Life, Metal Gear Solid, Panzer Dragoon Saga, Resident Evil 2, StarCraft, Thief, The Dark Project, Unreal, Xenogears, and Pokémon Red and Blue, which I previously covered on the show with Flashback 64. Really quickly, Momo, have you played any of these games I just mentioned?
Grim Fandango, Resident Evil 2 only partially because it was too scary. But I recently went back and played the remakes. And I think you said Banjo Kazooie. Was it Banjo Tooie or Banjo Kazooie the first?
Banjo Kazooie was 1998.
Oh wow! But yes, I did play Banjo Kazooie. Holy moly!
Really good crop of video games here. There's always people talking about like, oh, what is the best year of video games? Is it this year? Is it this year? And this 1998 comes up a lot because of crops of games like this, Ocarina of Time, Half-Life, Metal Gear Solid. And, I'm not here to debate that, but I will say I do think 1998 is maybe the most consequential year in video game history. It's one that kind of determines and just recontextualizes video games moving forward. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time definitely is like the blueprint for 3D action adventure games. It's in the DNA of so many games I've previously covered on the show. It's in the DNA of like Amy Hennig, who was a director for the Uncharted series. She worked on this series called Legacy of Kain before Uncharted. And she said that Legacy of Kain was tremendously influenced by the Legend of Zelda series. Hidetaka Miyazaki, the Dark Souls director, he talks about how the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is like the blueprint for action adventure video games like his. Fumitsu Ueda, who makes games like Ico and The Last Guardian and Shadow of the Colossus, is like, yeah, Zelda head over here. Hi, Zelda. That's me. It's just part of history now. And the first Unreal game comes out in 1998, and that creates the Unreal Engine, which is an engine that countless video games are built off of. Metal Gear Solid and Thief being these blueprints for the stealth genre, Half-Life doing narrative-focused first-person video games, and people just having their minds blown over that and putting Valve on this path to basically dominating the PC market when they release Half-Life 2 6 years later and then release Steam alongside it. Baldur's Gate, which is a BioWare game that just begets BioWare as a company, and then Baldur's Gate 3 comes out from Larian like last year and dominates everything after that. It's just a massive, massive year, 1998. So even if we can't say like, oh, it's the best gaming year of all time, it's very, very, very consequential. So yeah, I mean, it just feels silly for me to ask what made you decide on Ocarina of Time, considering its legacy. But what draws you to Ocarina of Time, Momo?
I guess, yeah, how you said it's so consequential. It is hard for me to like critique it in a way where it's like, am I being like curbed by nostalgia or just my reverence for this game? Because it was the first video game that I played. I think my neighbors had a V smile, if that counts as a video game. But that was more like I'm looking at blinking lights and colors when I was a child. But one that being my introduction to like how I could interact with the medium, but also it being 3D. Like this being one of the first like ventures into 3D for that franchise, but also like my first game experience. Because after that, I could not touch platformers. I remember New Super Mario came out, and I just was appalled. I was like, "Oh, where's the Z? Where's the Z space?" I remember my sister was like, "You want to play?" I was like, "No, you can only move left and right." Also, it's not like very engaging. But I think I wanted to talk about it just because it just does so many things that you can see echoes of. It was a scaffolding for almost everything that I'm compelled or attracted to now. I can see it in everything, and I think going back and unpacking it would be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a game with baggage to it, and we're just going to just throw all that baggage out the window and just talk about our personal love and, appreciation of this game and try and understand it beyond like its status as this thing, because you mentioned it's your first video game. Do you remember playing it?
I do. Oh gosh. I remember. Yeah, I do. I remember the first time I picked it up and stopped playing it because I got to the first time you do the water temple, Lord Jabu Jabu. I got stuck because as revolutionary as the Z targeting was, it wasn't the best. And this mini boss fight that you had before the final boss in that temple, I just could not figure out the boomerang. And I remember like getting so frustrated, I stopped. I like opened the game fac and I was like trying to read that. I like read that section over and over and over and over like 10 times. I was like, what am I missing? Yeah, that was also something where things in the game weren't one to one. I don't know how to explain this, but you were encouraged to discover the chemistry of the world and like how objects interact with each other. I remember feeling so smart and so cool when I didn't check when you do the Deku tree and I didn't check the guide for how to like get through the spider web. I remember thinking like, oh, I'm so high up. If I jump through this spider web, it'll break. I did. And I felt so smart, and nothing that I had done, like no movie or no TV show or anything that I did like engage with me on that level. And I think I try to look for that engagement in more games. It's very cool. It's like a very early memory.
Yeah. Do you remember about how old you were playing this game for the first time?
I was probably like definitely not kindergarten. That's way too young. Probably like first or second grade, like the 6 to 8 age range. I'm pretty sure that's the first
Okay.
time I played it, but I did not
Hmm.
beat it. I was. It was one. It was scary after a certain point. It was really hard. I think I
Yeah.
picked it up and played more through when I was like closer to 12.
Right. Of course. I would say this video game is the first video game I ever played, and video games were in my house because, again, I had older brothers who were 8 and 9 years older than me. At like 3 years old, I'm playing this game, and obviously I'm not playing it to completion. It's not the first video game I beat, no, but it's the first video game I remember holding in my hand and moving around in. Like it's the video game that I couldn't read. I didn't know what I was doing necessarily, but I knew how to walk around. I knew how to interact with the menus and use the items because everything is the only things that are really on the menus with words on them are the context sensitive A button, which has like the roll and everything on it. But since the menu is all pictures of the items, I just knew like, okay, I press this button and equip it there, and then I can do this. It's very intuitive in a lot of ways. It's got an incredible menu that I wish the Zelda series would kind of go back to instead of the more minimalist user interface of the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom thing. But I understand why they may have chosen to do that. But again, as a kid who couldn't read and could just like see everything on one screen and pick out what I wanted to do, it was incredible. And it's that being the first video game I ever played really just sort of informs my relationship with video games moving forward. Like I'm holding everything I play up to this first seminal experience, this thing that I didn't even know until I was using the internet as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, and realizing like it has this status as the greatest video game ever made. Like it was my personal favorite, and that wasn't being influenced by any outsider force. There was just like these were the games in my house, and I know I love this series, and I know like when the next game is coming out, but I didn't have that outside influence telling me it was the greatest game of all time. It was just like the most important video game to me.
Yeah, and I think growing up and then grappling with that notoriety, but also having that sentimental defensiveness, because I would interact with people who had never played that game, and I didn't have any superiority towards them, but like any Ocarina of Time fan like shudders at the word sequelitis. But like hearing those points regurgitated to me, and like a game being told that something is this, or it's clunky, or that it wastes your time, or that the people with no emotional connection to it. I was like its ardent defender. And even now, a lot of my friends, their first interaction with the Zelda franchise is through games like Breath of the Wild, and they kind of like recoil at the thought of backtracking. Where I'm like, oh, you'd enjoyed Twilight Princess, or you'd enjoyed Wind Waker, or you'd enjoyed the Ocarina of Time. It's on the Switch now, I'm pretty sure. But it's like, oh, there's no jump button, and I don't like how linear it is. No, it's a heavy burden to bear.
I guess this is as good a time as any to ask before we move into the next section. This is the first video game you've ever played. What is your relationship with the Zelda series in general?
That being the first one that I played, and then after that, I don't know if I played anymore because I did have a copy of Majora, but it was damaged. So anytime I put it into the N64, nothing would happen. So I never got to play it. And it's interesting because there was that like sequel type game, so I kind of like missed out on the continuation of Ocarina. So it kind of just ended there for me. And I think I picked it up again with Twilight Princess. So there was like a large gap where I wasn't playing it because I think it was Ocarina of Time, and then I got a DS, and it was just Pokemon, Pokemon, Pokemon. And then Twilight Princess for the Wii. Then I think I went back to Link's Awakening, for the Game Boy, and then Wind Waker. I never finished it because it wasn't my copy. I think what is it? GameFly. I rented it off of GameFly, and I didn't get to finish it, and I had to give it back. And then they remastered Twilight Princess for the Wii U, and it came with the little amoeba. What is it? Amiibo.
Amiibo, yeah.
Came with an amiibo. Wow, this franchise is so fantastic, and it really, really in depth my relationship with it. And then the 3DS came out, or that's not chronological, but then I had a 3DS, and then they remastered Ocarina of Time. I love that game, but there's just like differences that one make the game like a little bit smoother. Also, like a graphical overhaul. But I'm just so married to the N64. So I think I played that and then went back to the N64.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there was like a bunch of Four Swords in the middle. I played a little bit of Four Swords. They kind of brought back Toon Link, and it's multiplayer. And then A Link Between Worlds. That was a fantastic game. I love the sideburns Link, like the kind of first gen Link, where he's kind of like goofy and just a dude. He's not typically heroic. He's still the kind of elvish, just funny guy.
Yeah.
And then Breath of the Wild came out, and it was like you either got Mario Odyssey with your Switch or Breath of the Wild. And then I got Mario Odyssey. I was like, dang. So I worked for a little bit and then brought Breath of the Wild. And that was like a phenomenal game. I think everyone has that moment where they get onto the Great Plateau. It's like, whoa. And it's just completely new for the first time. It's incredible. And then, yeah, that was like the only Zelda game I played for a little bit. And then the Link's Awakening remaster, or just like a whole new game. I love the style of that. I haven't gotten Echoes of Wisdom, but I love that diorama, really tight field of view, depth of view, like toy looking. And I love how the game looks. And then Tears of the Kingdom. I still haven't finished it. Oh goodness, but very good.
Yeah.
So pretty like spotty Zelda fan. I'm like, I love it, but I haven't played every game.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to. I have played all the games a bit. I've only played a little bit of Skyward Sword. I need to go back and finish it. I own it on Switch, but that's maybe the biggest blind spot I have right now, except that Echoes of Wisdom has just come out and I haven't played it yet. Bit unemployed right now. Don't want to spend $60 on a video game. But as soon as I get my money up, I'm going to definitely play that game, because this is, and has been since I was literally playing video games and holding a controller in my hand, my favorite video game series. I just see beauty in all the different forms and shapes that it takes, CDI games aside. Everybody has a thing they sort of like hitch their trailer to, you know, like this thing that's like, I just carry this with me wherever I go. And that feels like the Zelda series for me. When I think about video games and like game design, I'm always thinking back onto like a Zelda game I can compare it to. And I'm saying that, and it's like, it means so much to me. And I can also like take a step back and know like no game is perfect. There's some very obvious issues with every single game in this series, but this is just like the thing I feel the most attached to. And doing this podcast, getting ready to talk about this game, and revisiting it, I just have so many strong feelings. Like I as objective as I try to be, and as much as this is about like other people's relationships with the video games, it's just hard not to get like overwhelmed with emotion revisiting these things and having so many like things I want to say about it. But yeah, what would you say your favorite Zelda game is besides Ocarina of Time?
Oh, that's difficult. I definitely, of the recent ones that I played, I definitely think Link's Awakening is one of my favorites.
Great answer.
Another community-based game, like you're stuck on this island, and everything is it kind of has that Majora's Mask element where it's like everything's kind of familiar, but your relationship with these people, like as a person and as Link, you kind of like project like, I know what's happening, like you're kind of like this person to me and this to this, and I'm looking for this person. But and especially the ending too. Spoilers, but like when you wake the fish and it's like, oh, this is all a dream, and you're gonna go back to life. It's like so, and it being so cutesy, especially this remake, like it kind of like punches a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Very, very domestic game. I love it when Link can just be a local hometown hero. It's great when he's the hero of time, or he's conquers all darkness. There's another one that I played that I forgot to mention, Skyward Sword, where it's like you're literally fighting the incarnation of like the cycle. Like you're fighting like the great evil that becomes the thing that's going to be with you for the rest of your lifetimes. But I don't know, Link is just like, oh, I'm lost, I'm on a boat, help me. And I love that little game long fetch quest you do, where you get an item from someone, they give you something, you have to figure out where it goes. So cute. Love that one.
Yeah. I mean, Majora's Mask is my favorite game of all time. And that definitely is like much more of like a hometown domestic thing, but also extremely dark in how it reckons with all of that. The not having enough time to do everything. And you can't do everything. It's like trying to make you feel smaller. And that's the same Hero Time who did save Hyrule thanklessly in this game. And that interacts with the grandness of this story, with the intimacy and the granular stuff that Majora's Mask thrives in a very interesting way. Because like I've been so like consumed with like, oh yeah, Majora's Mask is my favorite, that I kind of have been putting my feelings about Ocarina of Time aside, not in like a I disregard this game, just in like a I haven't thought about it much because like my thoughts about this incarnation of Link and this graphical style and this engine and like everything like that is just so tied up in the Majora's Mask of it all. And coming back to Ocarina of Time for the first time in years, like it's all been unzipped. It's I am like, oh yeah, no, this shit hits too. Whoa, hang on. I have so much to say.
You unzip me. It's all coming back.
So, and I'm very excited to talk about everything Ocarina of Time with you. But before we do that, we have to talk about how other people can access this wonderful game in a little segment I call No Country for Old Games. So before we talk about The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, we have to talk about how readily available this game is, so the people who are interested in playing it can check it out. It's hard to believe that there are people who haven't played this game, but you have to go out in the real world a little bit and realize your experience is not universal. As monumental as this game is, and as influential as it is, and like how baked into the language of video game and video game design, especially in 3D space as it is, many people haven't played it. There are still people who wish to check it out. The subject of video game preservation means a great deal to me because I believe that video games are an art form, as I said earlier. They can create experiences that leave impacts on the people who play them. This is literally the first video game I ever played. It is part of the reason why I see video games the way I do. Unfortunately, this means very little to publishers who have historically struggled with keeping older games available on modern hardware. And as time goes on, games that were once readily available become more and more difficult to purchase, acquire, and play. In this segment, we are going to rate today's game on a scale of A to ARG, and ARG is obviously an expression of frustration in how hard it is to acquire a game. It is not me covertly advocating for piracy, which is illegal.
This is illegal, you know.
The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was released on the Nintendo 64 on November 21st, 1998 in Japan. It was then released in North America on November 23rd, in Europe on December 11th, and in Australia on December 18th. 2 revisions of Ocarina of Time were produced for the Nintendo 64 after the original 1.0 version. Both the 1.0 and 1.1 versions come with either a gray or gold cartridge, while all 1.2 versions have the standard gray cartridge. The 1.1 version is mostly a simple series of bug and glitch fixes, but the third, 1.2 version, is the one that is often discussed. It has all the changes made in 1.1, but also changes the blood from the final boss from red to green. The music of the Fire Temple was also changed, as the original featured vocal samples of an Islamic prayer, and it was a policy at Nintendo to not include any references to any real-world religions in their games. During development, they were apparently unaware that the Arabic vocals were religious and directly invoking God. Speaking of removing references to Islam, future versions of the game ported to other consoles would use the 1.2 version of the game, with additional changes including replacing all instances of the Gerudo's crest, which depict a star and crescent moon, with the Gerudo crest used in Majora's Mask. This is the most notable change, as it also alters the design of Link's mirror shield. So even if you're just playing this game on Nintendo 64, it could be one of 3 versions. And that's not even including the 2 versions released in the PAL region, which are like the 1.2 version, but have a different frame rate, which sort of affects the physics of the game. But that's already too much. Let's talk about the other ports of this game. 2003 was a huge year for The Legend of Zelda, not just because The Wind Waker was released internationally, but because 3 versions of Ocarina of Time were released in 2003. 2 of them were on the GameCube. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was ported twice to the GameCube, both times as special limited edition releases, the first of which was a pre-order bonus for the aforementioned Wind Waker, titled Ocarina of Time Master Quest, which included a GameCube port of Ocarina of Time, as well as a new version called Master Quest, which is a more difficult version of Ocarina of Time with new layouts for the dungeons and some changed locations for the Golden Skulltulas and so on. It's just a harder version of the game. It's not this massive overhaul or anything like that, but it is a changed, altered version of Ocarina of Time. In addition to that, it was also Ocarina of Time was also included in the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition, which was released in November of 2003 that same year, as a pack-in bundle for Nintendo GameCube consoles. So if you bought a GameCube late in 2003, most likely it came with the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition, as was the case when I got the GameCube for Christmas that year. So those were two ways you could get Ocarina of Time on the GameCube. But, and this is less known, there was a third Ocarina of Time port that year, and it was released in China for the iQ player, which was a handheld TV game version of the Nintendo 64, released exclusively in China. It, alongside Wave Race 64, Star Fox 64, and Dr. Mario 64, and Super Mario 64, were launch titles for this China exclusive device on November 18th, 2003. After that, it was ported to the Wii. It was a Wii Virtual Console release on February of 2007 that you could buy for the equivalent of $10. It was also an emulated version of the Nintendo 64 version. This one has no vibration support, making the Stone of Agony item completely useless. It would be later re-released on the Wii U Virtual Console on July 2nd, 2015 worldwide, this time with vibration support, thank God. Most recently, it was ported to the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack on October 25th, 2021. You can play this game on your Nintendo Switch, but not optimally. Unlike previously releases, it cannot be outright purchased. You could buy it for $10 on the Wii. You could buy it for $10 on the Wii U. You have to pay a subscription fee now to access The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time on modern hardware. I have gone on this rant countless times. Just let people buy the games that they want to buy. Don't lock them behind a subscription model. I hate the subscription model and everything. Did you know that HP has a subscription model for fucking ink in the printer that you already bought?
Oh my god. As if ink wasn't expensive enough.
They try and make it so you don't own things anymore. You can buy a device and take it home, plug it in, and you just don't own it, apparently. And this has always been a problem with video games with DRM and things like that. You don't actually own the games in your Steam library because they can be revoked at any time. That is incumbent stuff. But now with the subscription model stuff that has become so normalized over the last few years, now you have to pay a subscription fee to continue to have access to, video games. And that was the case with like PlayStation Plus and everything like that. At least with like PlayStation Plus and Game Pass, you can actually purchase the games that are on those services. Here on the Nintendo Switch Online, you don't have that alternative. You cannot buy The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for your Switch. I'll save you the full rant. We got to do better. We got to do better, guys. Nintendo has to do better. I'm fine. What am I doing wrong? Anyway, Jesus Christ. There isn't just the Nintendo 64 version that's been ported across the home consoles across time. There was also the 3DS version, which is an enhanced port that was co-developed by Grezzo and Nintendo EAD. This is a faithful recreation of the Nintendo 64 version with enhanced graphics running at 30 frames per second as opposed to the original Nintendo 64 version's 20 frames per second. It hosts a series of quality of life enhancements, including managing your inventory through the 3DS's touchscreen, gyroscopic controls for aiming, which is a godsend. I am actually a very huge gyroscopic controls advocate. I love that shit so much. As well as an in-game guide system feature where players can find hints if they get stuck in the game, which is pretty likely because this game is definitely on the precipice between modern gaming sensibilities and classic gaming sensibilities. A boss rush mode and a master quest were added as well to this version. There are also small, numerous changes throughout this remake that are mainly presentational in aspect. For those curious about the full list of changes between Ocarina of Time Original and Ocarina of Time 3D, the remake, I've linked them in the description of this episode. Check that out. But that's all to say, Momo, when you get the urge to play Ocarina of Time, how do you play Ocarina of Time?
Luckily, it is still functional, but I play it on the N64 that I grew up with and the original cartridge. And I'm praying that they maintain their health in this age, but pretty reliably. I recently got a CRT for it because I would put it into the little mini flat screen my roommate had a long time ago, but wasn't potently nostalgic enough. I needed the big screen with the scan lines and everything. Yeah, fortunately, I do have a copy of the 3DS version, but I'm just so married to that old, like pre-rendered texture look, like where everything's kind of like blocky and grimier. They also made Link like a little bit more handsome in the new game. He kind of was like a little bit too slick for me. Like everything kind of got this kind of new edge to it. I like how blocky and kind of dorky everyone looks in the N64. But yeah, I tend to gravitate towards the original.
Smooth Link, I hear ya.
Mm.
Yeah, so this is a game that I have arguably too many copies of.
Mm.
My family has the original gray cartridge on a Nintendo 64. One of my brothers has it. It's not in my house currently. My younger brother and I, when we got the GameCube for Christmas of 2003, we had it with the collector's edition pack and bundle, which came with The Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask. So we also have the GameCube version of the game. And of course, I owned a 3DS version as well. It is right here in my drawer. If I want to play Ocarina of Time 3D, I can easily do so. I have no shortage of ways that I'm able to access and play Ocarina of Time. I have never bit the bullet on getting any of the ones on digital places like the Wii or Wii U. Haven't needed to. Plus, like, thank God I didn't, because neither of those consoles are in my home right now. I like the 3DS version. I love the quality of life improvements it made. I like that it runs at 30 frames per second. It's perfectly great. The improvements that it makes are mostly additive. There's a few things I don't care for, such as the way that the presentation of the Ganon fight, where it's too bright now and you can just sort of see Ganon the entire time, versus like the actual defining traumatic memory I have of my brothers fighting Ganon on the original Nintendo 64 version. I'm hiding behind the futon because that dark giant creature is so scary, and I'd never seen anything like that before. The vibes are immaculate in the most fucked up way on the Nintendo 64 version. But my gripes with the Ocarina of Time 3D port are relatively minor, and I have no qualms, and don't think anybody who's only played the 3D version has never truly experienced Ocarina of Time. I think that remake is a blessing, and I happily own it.
Oh, most definitely. I remember playing it, I think like maybe early high school, late middle school. And I was like, oh my gosh, the gossip stones have a purpose. I remember when I saw it like gyrating one day and there was this hole. And I was like, what is that? And this could have saved me so much time, because it is such like how you said, it kind of is that precipice, this event horizon of the old and the new, where some of these things, I genuinely wonder how I could have ever organically figured it out on my own. Or maybe I clicked through a text box too fast and I missed something that Jabora Kabora said to me. Like, oh my god, finding Zoro's domain was a nightmare as a kid. I just didn't know what to do and I couldn't find it. And like having these little built-in like guides that were kind of very tasteful. Usually, I know people are like, "Oh, Navi just like is so annoying. She tells you what to do," but I usually am off-put by these kind of like video tutorial-y things. But it was like very tasteful. Like it would just show you kind of like a vague clip of a location that you could recognize or a landmark, or like showing you an item that you would have no way to know that would do that. Like in the forest temple, I remember being stuck as a kid because there was no indication that you could hookshot the treasure chests. Like treasure chests are to open. This wood texture, like it being wood, did not mean that I could interact with it more than that. But stuff like that, I think, is like these cues are really important. Also, just it's nice to see the game, because I love the N64 one, and like you said, it has this macabre darkness to it, this atmosphere. But sometimes I'm like, dang, I can't see what I'm doing. Like the lock-on system is a little jank. I remember because I was replaying it for this podcast to prepare, and I was like, I don't think I can do this in time because I cannot see like Jack in the forest temple right now.
Yeah. People have their preferences, and I definitely had my complaints about the Majora's Mask remake, which I think does have a lot of great quality of life changes, but also balances it with some really frustrating little things. But with this, it's just like most of the changes are for the better, and the stuff that I don't love, I can at least see why they did it in a way that makes complete and total sense to me. It's not excessive whatsoever, in my opinion. Talking about the availability of this game holistically, with the 3DS and Wii U eShops closed, the only way you can officially play Ocarina of Time is through the premium version of the Nintendo Switch Online. You can buy physical versions of Ocarina of Time 3D for a decent price based on what I'm seeing online. I'm seeing some online listings on eBay and Mercari, and they're definitely not more than what you would have paid to buy this game day one like I did on a 3DS. But keep in mind, you have to have a 3DS to buy Ocarina of Time 3D and play it, so that's the other thing. You need to actually buy a 3DS if you want to play Ocarina of Time 3D. Since the only version you can play this game is locked to a subscription model, I cannot give this game an A for availability. But it's not quite an ARG because there is an official way that you can play it. What I can do is talk about how I most recently played this game. There is an unofficial PC port of Ocarina of Time. Are you aware of this?
I have not. That's my thing. I wish I was more savvy about emulating. I just love the way that controllers feel, and also like my kinesthetic relationship with video games that I play, especially when I'm replaying them. That's why I got this big CRT, because I love holding the goofy three-legged controller in my hand. I like laying down when I play. I've tried playing like DS emulators on the computer and like mapping them to like just the keyboard. I'm like, ah, but most accessible. But I heard you were playing on the PC, yeah, from Avry.
Yes. Yeah, Avery did tell you I was playing on the PC. So there is an unofficial PC port of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time that's called the Ship of Arkinian.
Mm.
And what it is, it's not an emulated version of the game. A couple years ago, Zelda fans were able to fully decompile The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which is basically just reverse engineering the game, looking at all the assets of the game individually. It's just like a deconstruction functionally. Take like the ship of Theseus. That's why it's called like the ship of Harkinian, is because like they literally like took this thing apart and rebuilt it on the PC, so it is actually running natively on your PC. This game doesn't need to run on an emulator like even the Nintendo Switch Online version does. This game, all you need to do is give it a ROM version of Ocarina of Time, and I own Ocarina of Time. So like I just put in a ROM of Ocarina of Time, and I got to play Ocarina of Time on my PC. And the thing with Ship of Arkinian is that beyond it being like, oh, you can play it natively on your PC, it has a wealth of quality of life things that you can add to it. You can play the game in widescreen in 1080p and 4K resolutions. You can change the frame rate of it from 20 to whatever the maximum refresh rate is on your computer screen. Mine is at caps at 80 frames per second, I think. So I was playing the game. I tried it out at 80 frames per second, said, oh, this is very uncanny, and lowered it. I'm so used to seeing it in 20 frames per second that like I just would have kept it there. But I appreciated the widescreen support. It has features on it that you can go into and toggle on and off that add the quality of life improvements from the 3DS version. So if you like gyroscopic aiming and you have a controller with gyroscopic support that you plugged into your PC, you can use the gyroscopic aiming. This is how I played the game, and oh my god, it is much better than playing it on the Switch, I can say. If you just want to play the original experience of Ocarina of Time, you can do that with Ship of Arkinian. You can play it in its 240p resolution with 4:3. You can do that. That's great, but it also offers that widescreen support, 4K resolution stuff. You can mod it if you want to. And it's entirely legal to, because again, it is not an emulated version of the game. It is a ROM that you insert into the Ship of Arkinian thing, the EXE, and then you are playing the game however you want to, because it is a game that you own and you can do whatever you want to with that game. It's legal. I would highly recommend people who are playing The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for the first time to check this out over the Switch port for a litany of reasons. Yes, Ocarina of Time is pretty janky because it is a 26-year-old game. It just turned 26 a couple weeks ago. This game helps mitigate most of that jank, I would argue, and it is the definitive way that you can play Ocarina of Time in the modern age. So look up Ship of Arkinian if you are interested in playing Ocarina of Time for the first time or in revisiting it. It also has randomizer options.
Yeah, I heard that you were playing the randomizer, and I was like, what does that mean? Like, is the layout different? Or the enemies, like, bosses swap around? Like, what is your experience with the randomizer?
Oh, great question. So the thing about, like, Ocarina of Time's legacy is, like, it is one of the most, like, prominent examples of things like the speedrunning community. The first time I was introduced to speedrunning was by watching people play Ocarina of Time speedruns. And that's not to say Ocarina of Time was the first to do any of this stuff. Just that, like, one of the most visible examples I saw of it in early speedrunning culture. Like, I saw, like, the Ocarina of Time ones. And randomizer runs are also a big prominent part of video game communities. And the Zelda ones are among the more notable ones. But like I said, Pokemon has randomizers. Like, you have, like, mods of Pokemon where, like, every time you go into the grass, it could be a legendary Pokemon. It could be Pidgey on, like, the road to the Elite Four. It could be anything. But with the Ocarina of Time randomizer, there's so many options that you can toggle on and off for. But in its vanilla version, it's mainly just chests and heart piece locations that are randomized. And the game has an internal logic, so like you cannot get soft locked out of the game. because of whatever you find. So it makes sure that you have the slingshot by the time you're in the Deku Tree or when you're in the Deku Tree, because you need the slingshot to be able to beat that dungeon. But also you could find the light arrows in the chest in the Deku Tree as well. It really recontextualized my relationship playing a game that I know back and forward. And this was my first time playing randomizers. So I really love that. And I am going to do a separate special episode in the coming weeks where I talk about my randomizer experience at large, because I actually have so much to say. So thank you very much for asking. Look forward to my more detailed notes on that later, because I don't want that to dominate the conversation about this game. All this is to say, check out the Ship of Harkinian unofficial PC port if y'all are interested in revisiting or visiting Ocarina of Time. And randomizers rule. And I am randomizer pilled. Anyway, that is No Country for Old Games. This is not an ARG. It's not an A. Owning video games is good and cool, actually. As many people should be able to check out this game as possible with as few barriers as possible, because this is an important game to people like you and me. And it's also just a monumental part of video game history. This game was a huge financial success. Despite releasing in late November of 1998, Ocarina of Time was the second best-selling game of that year, selling 2.5 million copies. It was outsold only by Pokémon Red and Blue, which sold 4 million copies. However, since Nintendo 64 cartridges were more expensive than Game Boy cartridges, Ocarina of Time was actually the highest-grossing game of 1998, generating $150 million in revenue. Adjusted for inflation, that would be $280 million today.
Holy cow.
Lifetime sales on the Nintendo 64 were 7.6 million copies, being the fourth best-selling Nintendo 64 game. It was only outsold by GoldenEye 007 was number 3, Mario Kart 64 was number 2, and of course, Super Mario 64 was number 1. This game wasn't just a financial success. It was released to near universal acclaim. Multiple publications such as Edge, GameFAQs, Game Trailers, and IGN at some point have given it the title of greatest video game of all time. To this very day, it remains the highest rated video game of all time on the review aggregation website Metacritic, where it holds a 99 out of 100 based on 22 critic reviews. And as mentioned before, this game has just been monumentally influential on video game development. This game has also influenced how people make and develop games. This game has given people the blueprint for navigating 3D spaces thanks to the Z targeting system, which, again, this isn't the first game that introduced targeting, but it is like the most prominent example of figuring out how to make locking onto something work in a 3D space. The atmosphere this game's able to cultivate, the design work happening here, its relationship with verticality, those were all tremendous, huge advancements that inspired so many people. Its contribution to video game development are incalculable beyond the examples I gave earlier in this episode. But we're here to talk about what this game means to people like you and me who played it. So let's get into that, Momo.
Need a new campaign idea for your tabletop role-playing game?
Looking to improve your GMing skills or become a better player?
Curious about exploring the origins of your favorite races, classes, and creatures?
Then check out the Maniculum podcast, where we show you how to use medieval history to your advantage. We're your hosts, Mac and Zoe, a professional medievalist and a AAA game developer, and together we use modern game design techniques to uncover the origins of your favorite tropes and adventures from medieval manuscripts. In each episode, we explore a new medieval manuscript, its connections to modern TTRPGs, and teach you how to adapt these tales into compelling campaigns and amazing adventures.
Whether you're looking to recreate the noble Arthurian tales or incorporate weird and wacky medieval monsters into your campaign, the Maniculum podcast has you covered.
Listen to our fortnightly podcast for free on iTunes, Spotify, or your preferred podcasting app now.
What do you like about The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time? And what does it do that you wish more video games would do?
I think a big thing, especially upon replay, most recent, having it fresh in my mind, is, well, of course, because of the technology and also the time frame and what they were trying to do with this game, pushing forward, is how much it revels in its limitation. There's so many key moments in this game, which It's like so refreshing. I can't remember the last time, and I'm not like the most avid video game player, so someone could probably cite something that came out a year ago, but a AAA, or I guess the company technically is AAA, but like a game of that like clout and notoriety, having fixed camera angles, like that just like blew me away. When you see the Temple of Time for the first time, it's just this big monolith, and you're framed in this way that you take up like less than 10% of the camera. I really, really love that, like curated experiences and moments. When the game really, really takes its time, not necessarily in a cutscene, because this game has beautiful cutscenes, but like how you interact and traverse this world. Like there are moments where you are a picture within a picture, like a frame within a frame. I love that stuff. And I guess I wish more games did that more. I love open world games. I played so many of them, but being able to like have this, I guess, like diegetic flow of appreciating the world, where it doesn't really take you out of your gameplay, and like the black bars don't have to come in for you to be like, oh, this is something that I need to appreciate, like very moment to moment. Because even just like walking around like the castle courtyard, I never did this as a kid because I was just like, okay, I have to go talk to Zelda. Okay, now I have to go to Hyrule Field. Okay, now I have to go to Kakariko Village. When I got older, I was like, oh, there's like a pathway down here, and there's NPCs I've never seen before talk to. There's information that there's a very organic flow to it all, which I really, really appreciate. I also really like its approach to fantasy and how kind of like digestible it is. Where you show up in this world and you're like a boy who lives in the forest with other kids who are always kids forever. It's like, okay, and it kind of like you kind of are pushed forward on this momentum of logic, where you meet rock people and they like fire, then you meet fish people and they like water. And I think it kind of like peters out in the end. Like the associations aren't as like tight knit as they are in the first 3 dungeons, but I like that approach to fantasy and like how it fulfills your relationship with that. Because with like the time traveling mechanic, where things that you established before like take root and grow, and you didn't get to see it grow, but you get to experience what it was or what it is now. Very, I think, intuitive in that way. It's very, very fun. Yeah, that's what I enjoy about this game.
Yeah. You said something really wonderful at the beginning, which is about moments of, you're talking about fixed camera angles and everything like that. Authorship, authored moments in video games are so good and important to me. And it is something that we kind of are losing sight of a little bit when we open things up a little too much, where a game has to take control away from you to really show you something. Whereas this game is very much dedicated to being, I'm not saying completely non-invasive, because famously, like the Kebora stuff, for example, right? Where a guy is literally stopping you in your tracks to give you some important information, and you have to like manually sift through it and then make sure you have the right input at the end so he doesn't repeat himself. But like this game is trying to maintain this like continuous sense of self throughout it. And that's why, among probably technological limitations, why all of its cutscenes are rendered within the engine itself in real time rather than using full motion video. Like Link always looks the same. It's always the same character model for Ganondorf and Zelda and everything going on in the cutscene, because it's trying to maintain its identity consistently. And when you're talking about like, oh, these, deliberate camera angles, like when you go into Castle Town and you don't really control the camera because it's trying to show you this stuff in a guided way, that's the stuff we don't really do anymore, because this emphasis on freedom is sort of taking away authorship, which can really just change the impact of one, what is the game trying to teach you in a non-intrusive manner, and also like how much can something impact you if you like look at it from a potentially unintended way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it is so easy to, I think it is really, really easy, especially in this kind of like modern landscape of games, to just completely miss things or do things on your own, or you are encouraged to kind of just make it on your own. Like I said before, where most games are radial and it doesn't really plan for you to see things in a way. I think that was what I had a hard time with playing Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, is like those memory sequences where sometimes I felt as if I'm like, oh, maybe I should have seen this at hour 2 and not hour 100 and stuff like that. And that's like my own. They're definitely, I think all the Zelda games are really intuitive in that way, especially this Ocarina is like open world, quote unquote. It is not. It's linear, but you can run around an open field and you can check out any of the places you want to, but you won't necessarily have access to it. but it is intuitive in the way where, well, one Navi will be like, oh, those clouds look weird over at Death Mountain. You want to go over there? Like, you say yes or no, but like you're still encouraged to like follow the flow. And same with Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild. They encourage you to follow a flow, but it's not mandatory. And I think because that was my first experience with storytelling, I kind of like wish for that to be more, but also in that organic kind of like voyeuristic way where like the camera suddenly goes over your shoulder, or you're in a dungeon and you're like, okay, why is the camera static now? And it forces you to recontextualize your movement and your relationship to one, the camera, and also the world that you're in. Like so much like I don't know how to say it, but yeah, like just non-diegetic things where it is clear that someone is intending for you, the player, to take control of like how you're interacting with this game rather than just kind of mowing things down.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I like authorship. I like intentionality. I like it when a video game is able to try and show you something rather than like give you a full sandbox where you are responsible for making your own fun to an almost detached degree on the part of the developers. The way that a lot of people struggle with open world games is that sense of pacing is so self-directed that they can end up flaming out earlier than they want to. I was talking about this with Dre in the Super Mario Galaxy episode in reference to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I feel like a big reason people are bouncing off of this game, which a game that I love quite a bit, is because like it's giving you too much and the direction it's giving you is too loose. Like it's giving you a bunch of things that you can go to on the map, and it's not really like giving you the urgency to go and stay on a critical path for the sense of pacing. So people end up like bouncing off the game before it's even over, because you can come back and do all these quests whenever you want to. They'll be waiting for you, but like some people are just like, no, I have to do everything because the things are on the screen and I can see them, which is a relatable and understandable experience. But again, it is a thing that I am becoming more conscious of and trying to make sure that I am not burning myself out too soon. Because again, Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, games I love. Tears of the Kingdom was my favorite game last year. That is also a game that's very easy to burn out of trying and do everything as soon as possible rather than try and find a more deliberate pace to set with it. And since I'm the director of that pace, that is a challenge that I have to take on. Whereas with Ocarina of Time, yeah, you can dick around and goof off as much as you want to. This is one of the games I like to dick around and goof off on when I was a kid. Just turn it on and hang out in Kakariko Village or Lon Lon Ranch and just run around. But in terms of like when I'm just playing through the game and trying to get things done, the direction this game is taking me on and everything like that, it feels so much more natural and it's very easy to get through.
Yeah, there's a constant momentum. I think that's another thing that I struggle with when things aren't time sensitive. I played Majora's Mask like very, very briefly, but I think another game that influenced me in terms of consequence and like momentum in games is Pikmin 1. I love the original Pikmin so much. And I feel like they kind of eat from the same like fruit of like there is like major consequences, even though there isn't like an in-game timer for the Ocarina of Time. Like even the visuals of you go in the future and then like when you become older Link for the first time and you walk outside of the castle courtyard and everyone's Redeads and Gibdos, you're like, oh, it is so serious and this is not the future that I want. And, like there is like that huge intrinsic value to stay the course and to see what you can do. And I love Breath of the Wild. I love Tears of the Kingdom. I played that front to back. Oh, I guess not Tears of the Kingdom. I'm still standing outside of Ganon's door. I have it to overcome that. But Breath of the Wild, I played Master Mode. I played the Champions DLC. There is a point where it's like, Zelda, I'm sorry you're going through this, but I need maybe like 60 more like Deku Seeds. And then I'm like, oh, I can't find these Deku Seeds. Whatever, I'll put it down. And I forget what I'm even doing. But I do like that flow sometimes when I talk to my friends and I'm like, oh, who did you get first? Vamado or the elephant or that one? And it does have that cool flexibility, which is that uniqueness to everyone's experience and accessibility where it's like, oh, I didn't get the fireplace or I don't like companion missions with Yunobo or whatever. So it's very malleable, but sometimes that malleability, especially for someone who's so like point A to point B, it does get exhausting.
Yeah, for sure. Especially with, and Tears of the Kingdom, especially, this is an issue that I have with the game. It's like you hear so many of the conversations over and over again because the game accounts for the fact that you can play this stuff in any order, but that just leads to a lot of repetition in them like communicating the same ideas over and over again. So you have to watch all four of the guardians like learn about the situation every single time you do a dungeon. It's like, I know this already. Whereas like something more guided and directed is not going to consistently to go, by the way, by the way, by the way. And maybe this is a bad example of that because you do have Navi going like, hey, listen. But that's much more optional than the way that Tears of the Kingdom does it, where it doesn't feel like it's rewarding the not rewarding, I guess, but it's like it's just like so self-conscious about the fact that the gamer could go in any direction with the story and take it at whatever pace that they want to, that they just sort of like reiterate stuff that doesn't need to be reiterated.
Demon King? Secret Stone?
Secret Stone? Demon King?
Demon King. Secret Stone.
Shut up and get to the point!
Whereas like with Ocarina of Time, you have a much more densely packed experience. Like a vast open world versus like a densely packed, like explorable area. Those are both completely valid approaches. And that's what I'm trying to emphasize. I'm not trying to say like one is better inherently than the other or one is bad necessarily. Simply that like there's a tendency to dismiss the older way of looking at it when like there's a very purposeful design reason for why something can just be so densely packed, because that's also an optical illusion if you think about it. I talked about this with Nate Perkypile, who was one of the developers on Skyrim. Skyrim's great magic trick is that it feels big, but it's actually very densely packed and small. But because of how much is in it, it feels so vast. And that's kind of how I feel about Ocarina of Time. Like it does definitely feel smaller in the wake of the 26 years of video games that have come out after it. But I can still feel like there's this vastness that it is very effective at selling you on because of its atmosphere, the music, the variation that you're able to see. Like there's mountains, there's a water region, there's a desert region, there's their Hyrule Field, there's a castle town, there's another town. There's so much civilization in this game, just so many areas of people that you can talk to. Since everything is so densely packed together, it just feels like much more accessible than previous games have because of how many people you're able to talk to and the variations of that. Like I know that Twilight Princess is functioning as like a larger, dark version of Ocarina of Time in a lot of ways, but it just does feel like that density of Ocarina of Time still makes it feel just as big in population.
Yeah, and especially through the established relationships, and again, like harkening back to the time travel aspect where you like meet these people and they maybe have like one or two quips or something like that, or you go to Kakariko Town and you're like, oh, the carpenter's master or the master carpenter is still here and everyone still bums, or even like I think that was one of my favorite kind of like civilian NPC relationships is like everyone on Lon Lon Ranch, Ingo, Malon, and the father. Like, I love that
Talon,
dynamic.
yeah.
Oh, Talon, thank you. Everything is so interconnected in like such a small space where it feels so lively, even though for the most part when you're traveling through Hyrule Field, you don't see anyone. It's like those bastions of people, and I don't know how they like know each other. I love those little fetch quests that you do across, and the Happy Mask Salesman. I think that was one of the smaller aspects of the game, not like super huge and integral, but that was another part of like branching out to people and reaching them and fulfilling smaller. Like you're still a hero, like you're still a hometown hero, you're still the hero of time, but that soldier that wanted to get a mask for his son like still gets it because you listen to him and you talk to him. Very,
right.
very, very good about that network.
Yeah, I mean, his name is Link because he connects people. It's interconnectedness. I mean, like it's a pun that goes in so many ways. He's the link to the player who's accessing this world, but like also like he is the great unifier. You are the person that goes to the Zora community and the Goron community and the community of people who live in Kakariko Village. And through your actions, you are connecting a group of people who are otherwise not really together. The Kokiri are isolated. They are completely separate from the outside world. And it's actually a curse that they're not able to leave the woods and go out and be a part of the rest of the world. And I think that's actually a very important part in understanding a lot of the themes of Zelda games, and particularly Ocarina of Time, is connection and the impacts we make on the world and how meaningful connecting with people are. When the game ends and the credits roll, it's everybody is together and celebrating together. And the Kokiri are finally able to leave the forest again. There was like an interview that was translated from a magazine that was trying to clarify that detail, because they say that the Kokiri can't leave the forest or else like they'll die. And then the interview asks like, well, if that's the case, then why are they able to celebrate all together? And why is Mito able to sit next to King Zora on Lawnon Ranch? And he's like, well, because the curse of the Deku Tree has been lifted and there's a new Deku Tree that's sprouting from the ground. And that's supposed to symbolize this new era where people are able to be with each other. And it's like, that's such a smart thing. And the game doesn't even need to communicate that, but it's just felt and understood because of the ways that Link is able to walk between all these worlds so seamlessly. It's great. God bless the Internet Archive for finding these like like these old magazine scans and uploading them and translating them too, because I learned so much from this interview. This magazine's called 64 Dream, and they had an interview with a bunch of the developers on it, right? They're all just answering questions that aren't really clear and told within the game, but like just enrich it so much. Like you talked about the time thing. I think this game does a really good job at making those 7 years difference feel so meaningful and important as part of this coming of age story that it's telling of a Link who goes from a child into an adult and sees his relationship with the world is completely changed. And that's not just seen in the atmosphere and the new facets of this world that he's exploring, but also in like how people have changed. There's the Dampé the Gravedigger, who is an old man who like digs graves, and then when you go to the graveyard as an adult, he died. He died of old age because he's an old man when you find him as a kid. And then you think like, what happened to that kid who was wandering the graveyard, who was just a child younger than Link? What happened to him? That interview clarifies Yoshiaki Koizumi, the fucking goat. He's just very casually like, yeah, on year 5 of like that 7-year absence, that kid goes into the Lost Woods and dies and becomes a Skull Kid.
Oh, wow.
And you're just like, what the fuck? That's Yoshiaki Koizumi just says that so casually. Another thing that they talk about is the Forest Temple. I love the Forest Temple. I love it environmentally. I love the implications of like this old house, this old mansion that lives in like this mystical wooded area, and it just feels so much older than everything else, but it also feels like a place somebody lived in, and you're navigating it as like this cursed abandoned place, and you're fighting these 4 ghost sisters. And I never processed this, and it's because I was a dumb kid who didn't read the book, I guess, but the 4 sisters are all named after the sisters from Little Women.
Okay.
I can't remember which developer was saying this, but they were saying like, yeah, I did that. I named them after the sisters from Little Women because I wanted to sort of have a shorthand for like, these Poes that you're fighting have been cursed or manipulated in some way to attack you and hurt you. They're not supposed to be evil spirits, but they have become corrupted. And it's sad that you are having to kill them, because when you kill the first 3 sisters and you go back out to the lobby area, you can see that the 4th sister, before you fight her, is crying and mourning the loss of her 3 sisters before she goes and fights you. And it's like, oh my god, that's heavy. And like, I never noticed until this playthrough like how mournful she is of the other 3 sisters right before you fight her. For some reason, like as many times as I played that game, I never picked up on that detail until now.
Wow, yeah, gosh, there is so much that goes into this kind of like emotional, like very anticipatory. There's like a huge grieving element to Ocarina of Time that I didn't really pick up on as like a child, because it's like, oh, I have access to all these characters, or like they were my friends before, but slowly watching all of your friends become sages, and you don't really pick up on, it's like, I'm not going to be a part of your world anymore. Like Casaria kind of really implies that, and Mito picks up on that, where he's like, oh, Saria isn't coming back. And not all of them acknowledge it. I think Daruni is like pretty chill. He's like, oh, I'm the Sage of Fire. Sorry about my son. But Ruto's like, I know I'm not going to be able to see you anymore. And it's like, oh, wow. Like, even in the main cast and all the characters, like, that's another one of my favorite side quests. When the because the Kuko lady and the master carpenter's son, they're related, and then you have to find him, and you get the medicine, you come back, and I think her name's Fado, like the little Akiri kid, she's just like, oh, he turned into a stall child, by the way, there's no hope for him, sorry. And it's like, whoa, okay.
Kids, could you lighten up a little?
Nothing I could have done, and you just keep rolling with the punches that, like, things aren't going to be the same. Even when you don't travel through time, like, things just don't remain the same. It's very, very loose concept of, like, death all over the place in that game. Very cool.
Yeah, death, loss, and the game is maybe the best depiction of a coming-of-age story I've ever seen in a video games. Like, the Earthbound and Mother games do it really well, but I think that this is still the best and my favorite in terms of being able to communicate, like, what it feels like to grow up, because it literalizes that. Miyamoto originally wanted Ocarina of Time to be in first person, but when, like, the aging up thing became such an important facet of the experience, he was like, well, we can't have it be in first person because it would hit much harder to actually see that maturation happen, to see this character grow up, and we need to be able to see that as the player, like literally see a grown-up character model. Because, and I'm sure this has been talked about to death, how low stakes and whimsical the adventure is for those first 3 dungeons leading up to you getting the 3 spiritual stones. You go on a whimsical adventure. There's sad moments along the way, but the things that you're doing are like, oh, I'm sneaking past these castle guards, and right before that, I had to, like, use a chicken to wake up the sleeping farmhand who is blocking my way into the castle, and then you're sneaking around there, and, like, the big child fetch quest is you selling masks to people, whereas, like, the big adult side quest is you, like the thing you just talked about, that watching a guy kind of die actually along the way of you trying to get a better sword, because, like, the item you unlock is, like, more masks, and especially the Mask of Truth, and they don't do anything that is required for anything, and you don't need the big Goron sword either, but that's, like, a huge damage output upgrade. And, like, when you're just a kid, you're selling masks just so you can read gossip stones at most. The big reward for being a child is additional knowledge, and the big reward for, like, doing that stuff as an adult is hurting people harder. That alone, like, implies something. I just put that together now. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and especially between your, like, main arsenal, like, switching between, and I like that it maintains your loadouts when you go back in between the times. His slingshot becoming the bow, or, well, I guess you can still use the bombs, but the hookshot not being accessible to you, like, places high up, or even just, like, how you damage things, because, I don't know, a bow and arrow is so much more, it's, like, vitriolic, and, like, I'm pea shooting, I'm, like, shooting little Deku Seeds, Deku Nuts at you, like, all the elements that you grew up in, like, being a child of the forest, you kind of set to the wayside. And even the ocarina that Saria gives you, it always kind of bugged me. Like, I wish I could, like, select it in the map, like, or in the item thing. Like, I just want to play, like, the original one that she gave me. It's so sentimental, but being the hero of time, you need the Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, it's like a thing where it's like you have to leave something behind to carry something that is a necessity. I understand, like, how frustrating it is. Like, you want to hang on to something sentimental, but you have to leave childish things behind because you get the Ocarina of Time right before you become an adult. And then that big, like, moment of change is Ganondorf knocking you aside and realizing, like, yeah, you went on an adventure and you did, like, 3 things. Great job. Congratulations. Yeah, cool. You did one little stealth section where you snuck past some guards to learn a song. Cool. Cute shit, kid. Like, I think you can only encounter, like, 1 re-dead as a child before you become an adult. And that's if you choose to, if you learn the Sun Song, you can encounter some re-deads if you learn the Sun Song before you become an adult, but you're not required to do that. But the first thing that happens after you leave the Temple of Time as an adult is that you see the town that was once populated and bustling with people has been reduced to rubble, and the only things walking around are these shambling re-deads, these haunting evil things. And this is another thing I only noticed for the first time on this playthrough, is if you defeat a single re-dead, and there's more than 1 re-dead in the area, the rest of them will just swarm the defeated re-dead. They'll just, like, shamble over to him. They won't even, like, go after you. They'll go towards that re-dead. And I don't know if that's them eating the corpses or mourning the fallen re-dead, but either way, that's so fucked up and dark that is a thing that the game programmed.
Right? But such a, like, interesting character that's utilized so specifically and kind of like, I wouldn't say it's underrepresented in the game, but I feel no other, besides the bosses, no other casual middle ground, like, obstacle or enemy interacts with you in that way. Like, one, the horrifying scream, but also like when you first encounter them in that royal graveyard, but the way the camera, like, you relinquish control, you can't even move. Very interesting. And also how they attack you. And also, I think when you defeat one, it doesn't really go away. It doesn't burst into items. There's nothing to collect except for magic sometimes. It just kind of like curls up and lays there. Very interesting. The focuses of this game. Very macabre.
It is. This is the first Zelda game with Redeads in them. So it's very much like a purposeful thematic addition to the story it's trying to tell. And it's like they symbolize this loss of innocence and this like seriousness, this grave seriousness of this new like thing you're occupying. And suddenly the stakes are much higher because the parallel world in, A Link to the Past is like there's Hyrule and then there's the dark world. This isn't a dark world. This is just a timeline that has been ravaged by Ganondorf, who has been able to do whatever he wants to for 7 years, and you're trying to fix it. You're trying to fix the drained lake. You're trying to restore the Goron city, kidnapped and jailed inside of a volcano. You're trying to change and save this world that has been changed. The sheen of it is lost, and then you go back, and it becomes mandatory after you beat the water temple to go back as a child and go under the well, and then you find Redeads and that evil fucked up monster that I can't remember the name of. That
Dead Hand. Awful creature.
Awful. The most scary thing I've ever seen. Scared me as a child, still scares me to this day a bit when it like grabs you and it keeps you paralyzed in a spot, and you realize like I'm doing this as a child, and this evil has been under this well the entire time. This evil has always existed, but like I just never saw it before. But like I don't have that childlike innocence even more. Even I have become an adult, and even though I've like turned back into a child, I can never be a kid again. I've lost that childhood. I've lost that innocence, and I can't put that back. It's become too real on both sides now, and Ganondorf has robbed this child of that. This kid's destiny has put him on a path where he can never be a child, and that's such a insane thing to pull off because he's literally raised in the Kokiri Forest, which is the Neverland of never growing up and aging.
Yeah, and if you hadn't had gone back before to the well, like as a child, just on your own whim after the Song of Storms, like seeing the cutscene in which you just show up and everything's on fire and burning with the last bastion, and then it's that tone shift again in an already very tone shifted game. So very jarring, very effective. Yeah, especially that being kind of the most the most gruesome thing that you have to endure. Like I think in later questions, like some of my gripes with that game is kind of how like touch and go the interplay is with the time travel. But I think that is one of the most successful after the first time you do that is when you go back to the well as a child. Because it's like I wouldn't even do that as an adult. I feel like the shadow temple isn't even as scary as the well. Sometimes I wish they would like change hands, but.
Yeah. Like I really like that stretch of like stuff that kind of happens. I think the Shadow Temple is just fine as a temple. If I had to like point at the weakest temple in a game, it'd be the Shadow Temple because of how it's basically a straight line with just like a couple curves in it. But I like that beneath the well segment, and I like the way that you access the wells by creating a time paradox, because you go into the windmill as an adult and he's like, I'm so fucking pissed off because this kid, oh man, he played this song and it fucked up the windmill and it ruined my life and I can't ever get the song out of my head now. And he's like, you want to hear the song that he put into my brain? You're like, yes, I would love to hear this song. And then he plays the Song of Storms and you're like, cool. And then you go back as a child and then you play the Song of Storms in front of him to like drain a well, and you created the circumstances that drove him to madness and consequently taught you the song. So he teaches you the song that drove him crazy, and it's a fucked up and very funny time paradox, but it also leads into the most fucked up segment of the game, the bottom of the well, and then that leads into like, again, my least favorite temple of the game. But that stretch of like learning the Song of Storms, going under the well, getting the Lens of Truth, that segment is so strong because you're fighting mostly adult Link enemies as a child. And again, like underlining that like you're no longer in the body of an adult, but you still have like these adult stakes that you're dealing with, and the only difference is now that you are physically weaker and smaller in the face of them. The Spirit Temple, you're also fighting Stalfos and things like that too, so you're still fighting adult level enemies as a kid that just keep emphasizing, yep, it doesn't become easier just because you're a kid now. I'm sorry. You can't escape it.
Point of no return.
Yeah. Speaking of the temples, what is your favorite temple in the game? Or dungeon?
Even though it gave me the hardest time as a kid, I really, really love Lord Jabu Jabu. It's like the whole...
Really?
Yeah. I like how it kind of has that level, like it's like the entry level to the later water temple, which I think is unanimously like on the lower end just because of how kind of involved it is. But I really, really like one Lord Jabu Jabu, just kind of just an unexplained thing. Like he could be like the Duke of, you don't know what he is. He's just an animal. But I like how you meet him, you feed him a fish, and that's one of the few times you really, really have to use the jar. That's one of my favorite items too. I just love the jar, the concept of like taking things other places. But yeah, it's cool. It's got all these full of parasites. I think that's really funny and interesting. And you get the boomerang. I love the boomerang. It's so much fun. I don't know, it's so kind of like gruesome. Like everything around you is flesh and the texturing is really funny. It's like super cheeky. And Ruto, she's kind of like your only companion in the game. So like having her, using her as an item basically is really, really fun. She adds like a lot of personality to that dungeon. Makes you feel like less alone. It's like a little buddy cop moment. Just fun.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned Jabu Jabu's Belly being maybe your favorite, because I think, in my personal opinion, it's my least favorite. I think all of the dungeons and temples do an amazing job at creating an atmosphere, that just cultivating that like vibe so perfectly. Presentation-wise, I think this game has incredible presentation that endures despite this being a Nintendo 64 game. There's something about like Jabu Jabu's Belly. It's like, it's very small, I guess, and short once you figure it out. But like, it's very frustrating that first time. Like if you haven't played the game in like a long, long time, it's like a little frustrating. How do I do this? How do I get this? How do I get her up there? All that. But like, I figured out the game. It's very easy once you figure out what to do and get her up there and everything like that. But like looking at it holistically, it's like just a series of chambers where you beat all the enemies in them, get the chest, move on to the next thing that's opened up because you emptied out that first room. Because I think it's like, what is those like uvula things that are coming down from the ceiling?
The parasite tentacles. You just go to one room and you're like, okay, the red one destroys the red thing blocking there. The blue one destroys the blue thing. And I think that's what is kind of echoed in like the water temple later. It's not a matter of, okay, I go through this way, get everything here, and then I go to the next one. It's like you get a survey of everything, but you don't know in which order to access that. So getting into the swing and the cadence of the orders, like just another thing on top of that, when already sometimes the map isn't super intuitive, or the way that they explain things, like figuring out they have to like fall down the holes and like each hole puts you in a different spot. I never remember. And I was going, how do you even progress?
Right. People complain about Princess Ruto in that dungeon. It's like, that's the thing that makes the dungeon, that's like the saving grace of the dungeon, if anything, because without her, it would just be, okay, step on the switch and then you do this thing. But like having her and carrying her with you, it makes it's a very interesting thing that doesn't happen again. And that adds variety to the experience. And also like, it's just funny that there's like the spunky kid, spoiled princess thing happening. And it's like, yeah, I'm doing all the work, but she's taking all the credit. By the way, we're engaged now at the end of this. I think that dynamic is very cute and very whimsical and like emphasizes like, this is a little kid and another little kid. I like that dynamic, but taken as a whole, I just think the dungeon is just kind of like lacking in a variety that really Ruto is like the one saving factor of personally. Yeah. I like the water temple, actually. I do think that it's the most challenging temple, and I like that. I think that has gotten a lot of reappraisal and reassessment with the 3DS re-release, showing that like the main annoyance was that the iron boots weren't an equipable item and something you had to keep going into the menu to manually equip. Something that the Ship of Harkinian accounts for, and also allows for more item slots that you can assign to the D-pad. So like I would always keep like the hover boots and the iron boots equipped on the D-pad, and then like just switch back and forth quickly. The other thing is like the challenge is how you handle the water levels, and kind of remembering like where you need to raise them and lower them. And I don't mind that part of it because, again, it actually requires some critical thinking and some knowledge of the room beyond the one you're currently standing in. And I really like that. I think it makes you need to know the space, to your earlier point about it. It just feels like a very good, like, midpoint challenge of the game. And especially because, like, right afterwards, the Shadow Temple just feels really disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
I really do think that that's, like, just a really inventive and really creative thing where you're, like, just changing the structure of the whole temple and, like, dealing with the consequences of that and progressing and trying to find your way around all that. I just really like it.
Yeah, that's one of one of my more favorite, like I think my ultimate favorite in terms of aesthetics and just like the kind of chemistry that you develop with Ruto because of Lord Jabba Jabba is something that you don't have with any of the other sages, with any of the other characters really. But I love the Water Temple in its ability for you to, I think, super engage with like the tools that you're given. I've never opened the map, like a dungeon map especially. I used to think like the compass and the dungeon map where I was like, oh, they're kind of like secondary items. I'm glad I found the big chest, but I was hoping it was the cool thing I get to leave the dungeon with.
Mm-hmm.
Learning your landmarks, establishing which relationships you're like, oh, this lifts this so I can go under there. Or even thinking about that you now have to factor in that floors become inaccessible and accessible and seeing what things you need and where they are and kind of like reverse, like building the equation to get to X. You're like, okay, this is on floor 2 and I need a key. Down here is this and this. Love it so much.
Yeah.
It's like also one of the few dungeons, if like any of them, that you utilize the ocarina within it besides the Temple of Time blocks. Like, I feel like that's a kind of like tacked on to some of the dungeons. Like, oh yeah, you can play a song to get here. Move this block if you want to, but that one's really like, okay, I need to go to level 3, so let me go to level 2 and then go up there and then do this. Very cool.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I can understand people being like annoyed because the dungeon item is just a longer version of an item you already have, the long shot instead of the hook shot. But I do think that it's a very well designed dungeon. I really like that Dark Link mini boss is really cool and really memorable. The dark version of the hero is just like a thing I'm always going to like lose my shit over. I love that. I love it when it happens. And I think the actual battle is like this really challenging and really engaging thing. So I'm always going to be a Water Temple defender. Atmosphere, music, presentation, all of it.
Yeah, I recently, I think the past couple days, I played the Dark Link fight. It'll never not shock me when you block and retaliate and then he just jumps on top of your sword. That is almost like, oh shit, like a moment. And it hit me again this past week. And I felt so bad for cheesing it, but like the combat in the N64 one is like a little hit or miss. I was like, whatever, I just didn't fire at him till he exploded and he passed out. So I was like, oh, whatever. But still such an amazing fight. Big fan of the doppelganger. My favorite Sonic character is Metal Sonic. Like, I love that, like, you're not even good enough to, and there's 2, oh yeah, my god, he has 2, of a different franchise, 2 doppelgangers, like the anti-you, or the messed up version of you, or the metal version of you. Like, you're not even good enough to be my prototype type stuff. I love it. And the fact that Link, someone who you impart all of your personality onto, and who is voiceless, is just purely motivation, purely instinct, and is just fulfilling a role to see that twisted version of yourself. And the only thing Navi says is conquer yourself, like conquer you. Whoa. Very, very cool. For it to be a mini boss is crazy. You just fight Morpha after that. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Morpho's all right. But like that Dark Link battle is just so evocative and cool, and the environment being like this seemingly endless room with only like one island in this otherwise oasis. There's like a little tree in there, and it's like, am I outside? What is this? Is this an illusion? And then Dark Link just appears and like, whoa, shit. And I don't know, it's like one of the most memorable moments of the game to me. The Dark Link thing is that comes from Zelda 2, but it is like that fighting a dark version of yourself that like copies your moves comes from that original Prince of Persia game that I discussed in a previous episode of the show. And it's something like coming back to that, having now played that Prince of Persia game for the podcast, I just have a deeper appreciation for that Dark Link fight and the implications of it, and also just the fuck you moment of like doing a forward stab and he just jumps on your sword. That stuff just feels
Clubs you over the head. It's one of their more successful rug pulls because they do that with like almost all the bosses. Like, you go into the room, nothing happens, you try to leave, and they're like, wait, we're gonna drop the bars on you, you can't leave the room. Like getting to the door in the Infinite Azure, and then you turn around and there's this like ominous silhouette that just Such a cool render too. I love these like texture, like smoked glass. Very cool.
I love the way that like those boss battles teach you something early on, but specifically Goma and Phantom Ganon, which are both respectively the first bosses you fight as child and adult Link. Because Goma is like teaching you need to go into first person mode to see things above you, which is something that you're sort of like subtly taught throughout the dungeon, because it's the place where you get the place where you get the slingshot. It's where you jump off from the highest point to get to the lowest point. Like that verticality is constantly emphasized, but like it culminates in you having to look up and see Goma, who you're going to have to shoot down from the ceiling with your slingshot. And then similarly, Phantom Ganon, you have to use your bow and arrow to find him in the paintings and then take him out there. They do it twice and it's fun both times. Do you have a favorite boss battle? Like, I know, like, if we talked about your favorite dungeon, like, what's your favorite boss battle?
Oh, wow. I think it is Phantom Ganon, because I love Ganon as a character, because you kind of fight him in, like, the super crazy beast form, but, like, seeing him, I love his Ocarina of Time incarnation. It's, like, so stylish, like, his super long legs, the kind of bodice, like, his horse, and, like, the mask, and also his laughter. Like, I love the sound font of his laughter in that game. Just super duper amazing. So cool. And yeah, like the looking around the room, that's like the one time, because the game like brightens up and you zoom in and then he tries to like juke you out. This is very, very cool and great music every time he's on screen. His music cue is awesome. The first time you see him in the castle, just such a cool guy. So to fight him in that form, and also the resolution of that fight, where he's like, "Oh, what a pitiful copy! I'm going to send it to the darkest, evilest, torturous realm." And it was like, "Oh, dang!"
And it's mocking you too, because like, yeah, that was a clone of me. That's like a weak version of me. You're not strong enough to fight me yet, kid. And that being like the first adult fight that you have, you're still scaling yourself against him. Just because you're an adult doesn't mean you're strong enough to beat him yet. You still have to have the experience and everything else coming up ahead. It's great. I like this game has jank. I mean, like it does definitely like show its age and like how you control it and everything like that. But how effective it is at narrative and how effective it is at atmosphere and how effective it is at telling its story and like the pacing of it and the themes of like the coming of age and the loss of innocence and how it's just so able to completely sell that. All of that is why it is so magnificent and special to me, not because like it aged perfectly over 26 years or anything like that. So on that note, we're talking about, I mentioned like, you know, it's got some jank. What are some flaws of the game to you? What do you wish this game did better?
I think this does tie back into your point of the Shadow Temple. I think those last two temples are kind of the weakest links. Excuse the pun. The weakest aspects of at least the mainline story, because I wouldn't ask them for them to be 5 spiritual stones, but you're like heavily invested in those first 3 temples because it is like a mandatory engagement to rescue the Kokiri, save the Deku Tree, or like spare the Deku Tree, meet the Gorons and befriend them, and you develop this bond with them, and then the Zoras too. And there's no real incentive to understand Impa. She's like a cool character, and I guess Sheik also plays into that too. But like also the Gerudos, like they're just like the bad guys, and then you go there and you're just like, oh, you guys are just bad. And I guess you're a sage, so you're cool, Naboru, but almost whatever. I think that is kind of like the weakest part, and my memory of those games. And even while I was playing them, I was like, okay. And also the items that you get, like they're not crucial to the game, but the world and a lot of the story is so critical. Like they interact so critically with each other. The first 3 temples and then the first 3 stones, the items that you get, the people that you meet, and the story are like so well meshed together that those, by comparison, they're not bad, but they just feel weaker and kind of more extraneous, especially because you don't interact with the associated people with those ones. Yeah. And I guess, like you said, the old jank. Like some of the logic in this game is like you really, really have to kind of like think, like scratch your brain, get some like how some of the items interact, how you progress some things. But like you're not completely helpless. There are like maybe there's an offhanded character. I didn't even know this till like my most recent playthrough, but if you just so happen to like skip the ocarina or something, I think there's a soldier who dies. He like dies in front of you that you can talk to, and he's like, "Make sure you get that thing from Zelda," and then he passes away, and he's just
Oh, I
like
didn't
in
know
an
that.
offshoot alley. Yeah, it was crazy. I just was like walking around the alleys, and right after Ganon runs off and chases Zelda, and she throws the ocarina of the thing, he's like, "Oh, she Impa left with the princess. You have to make sure you get the ocarina of time. Like you can't leave without it. You need it." Because you could totally just like not pay attention to the cutscene and not see her throw the thing in there and not Z targeted onto it. But I thought that was pretty cool. But there are some like obtuse things sometimes where if you're not super 100% attentive or like kind of thinking outside of the dialogue boxes, that you can get caught up on and you're like, I need a game fac. And also like, I think this is just a general Zelda thing, is like representation and othering. And I feel like the Gerudo and Ganondorf are really kind of like contentious figures within the Zelda franchise space, but also just like fantasy as a whole is like othering and representation within these non-human and othered races. Like you can tell there's like clear cultural influences for each of these aspects, but their presentation and their, I guess, like narrative presence and consequence is like significantly different than just like the Hylians and stuff like that, which is just like a common fantasy problem. But there's just like some stuff, but even how you talked about like the removal of some like religious imagery or things that like were like not super tasteful, I think that's where it struggles. And sometimes I like feel that was kind of a lot, but my general problems, love it, but you can critique the things you love.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing where it's like fantasy is always going to have some sort of like real world analog and parallel to it, unless you're just like thinking in complete abstractions. And with the Gerudo, a lot of that symbolism with like the moon and everything like that is like a deliberate, like, it's hard to say like, oh, that we accidentally used Muslim imagery for this culture. I believe that in the case of like the Fire Temple, that was completely accidental, that they got like Islam chants because like the Islamic chants, because they did say they got that from like a sample file from like an audio library that they got that from. It's like, yep, that tracks. I don't think you're being intentional with the chants, but like the moon on the shield feels like a little too close there, considering the architecture and then like the proximity to the desert and the exoticism of the music. I mean, it's the best track in the game, but like there is like just like it is trying to underline the exoticism, and like that's a big thing, especially in the late 20th century, the exoticism of the Middle East. So like people who have criticisms of that, like I'm not going to like be like, oh no, you're extrapolating. Like no, there's a thing that they had to like release future versions of the game to completely take out a symbol to like have some level of like deniability. There's allegations that Nintendo took those things out because of complaints. I think that is not true. The truth is they did that because Nintendo doesn't like it when there are overt religious references in video games, and those are overt religious references. There was no community rallying and like trying to call for the censorship or removal. This was entirely self-imposed by Nintendo. And I do think that the rumor that there was pressure from like the Islam community to change that is probably just anti-Arab sentiment that people just made assumptions about because it was 1998, and especially like stoked in the flames of like the early 2000s and internet culture around that, because it was simply not the case that there was calls for censorship to Nintendo to do that. But yeah, that's the point. I see your point. All to say, I see your point.
Yeah, just like as a person of color, like interacting with fantasy, it always comes with the begrudging, like, oh, like this like discrepancy between races and these, I would say, flimsy allegories, but also like how you're saying the exoticism and sometimes the demonization like of culture and race, and how these are like inseparable, and like destiny and who you are as a person fundamentally can never be changed. And like I don't know, as someone who is Japanese and then has to divulge my feelings on things produced in Japan and then also like people's reflection in the West, where it's like sometimes there can be an awareness, there can be an education, and there is a push for it. I think Tears of the Kingdom walked back some of its sentiment in that way, where like they're pushing the edge again, where it's like, okay, this might be come across as Orientalist, this might come across as exoticism, and they're like walking it back. But people love to be like, they had no idea. Like, why would they know that? Like these poor Japanese developers don't know anything about the world. I was like, guys, they're like all 50.
Yeah.
Like they don't live in like Wakanda. I think they'll find it. I think they know what's going on.
Yeah. They're not isolationists anymore. That was like hundreds of years ago. What are you talking about?
Right. And it's just so funny because then like these things will lapse. It's like it depends. There's no absolutes to everything. Like unfortunately in the way of the world and intercommunication, like interculturally, like things will be messy. It's just the willingness to address these things, and especially in fantasy. I like the direction that fantasy is going now. Not now, but like I think I like the openness and the diversity that is coming. It still comes with baggage. People being like, I think all elves should like that type of thing. But I don't know. It's never, but it doesn't feel mean spirited. It's just it could be helped, you know.
Yeah. The Japanese have never been racist. What are you talking about? Don't look up their history. Don't read their history.
Like,
what are you talking about?
I was like, they made JoJo. What are you talking about? This is like, come on.
Just like the idea that like you're trying to uwu-ify the politics of a nation that they could just like claim ignorance on is just a different form of racism to me that like absolves people of potential wrongdoing. I can't comment on this too much because I'm white. You know. Yeah.
Ally, thank you.
Yes. All this is to say is I see it and I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Other criticisms I have of the game, and it's this thing where it's like I know what I need to do, but I also am not able to be like naturally everyone should know this. This section of the game where, and I this is a long complaint. One of the earliest emotionally affecting things that this game does is when you leave Kokiri Forest and set out on your own for the first time, and you meet Saria on the bridge, and it's this immaculately presented moment where like it's just two people standing on the bridge, and it's the one person in Kokiri Village who is nice to him. It's like you're losing your first friend because you have to set out into this world, and she gives you this ocarina as a keepsake, and then you leave. And then you set out into the world. And then you do a couple of quests. You wake up Talon, you go into the castle, you learn Zelda's lullaby, you take the note to the soldier outside Kakariko Village so you can go to Death Mountain, and then you need to play Zelda's lullaby to get into Darunia's chamber. And he's like, I need to dance. Can you play a song for me so I can dance? And you need to go find Saria again. That moment is almost undercut by the fact that, like, in basically 2 or 3 in-game days, you're already going back and reuniting with the person who you just had this emotional farewell to, and it kind of undercuts itself because you need to learn Saria's song. There's part of me that wishes, like, maybe that should have been the first song you learned in the game when she gives you the ocarina as a keepsake. Like, could she have not have taught you the song there? And then you could like bypass that entire thing. But I understand on a game design level why that isn't the case. Firstly, there's emotional heft to the fact that the first song that you learn in the game is Zelda's Lullaby, which is an established song in the series. It's established itself in A Link to the Past. There's something powerful about like the first song you learn on an ocarina is like an established series song. And it's important to imbue like this like game design sensibility of needing to backtrack and go back to other locations in the game. And it's important that the player is aware of the Sacred Forest Meadow when they need to eventually go to the Forest Temple. So like that's 2 game design things that like would make it a problem if Saria had taught you the song from the get-go. And I think the reason people get really frustrated by that backtracking is because they assume that they have to walk all the way back to Kokiri Forest to find Saria, and then go through the Lost Woods, and then find the meadow, and then find Saria, and then get the song, and then backtrack all the way back to Death Mountain. When there is an immediate entrance into Kokiri Forest. And the way that you do that is after you open up Darunia's chamber, he has torches, and then you light the torches throughout the Goron city, and then you take the fire, you knock over one of the bomb flowers, and then that opens up a path to Kokiri Forest, which you can then use to have an immediate path back and forth from Death Mountain to the Lost Woods. If you don't have that information and know that specifically torches can be used to knock over bomb flowers, I can understand why you would think that backtracking is totally fucked. I do think it is already kind of like a little wobbly as a game design thing, but it is teaching you so much that it does have value. So I don't really know what the solution is, but I do think that it does help people to talk and listen to everybody on the path so that they can sort of learn this kind of stuff, because I do think there is like some way that you're able to hear that like the torches can be used to knock the bomb flowers off the wall. All that to be said, like I'm not inclined to overly defend this issue, but it's a flaw I completely understand, but it is one where it's like I don't really know what the proper solution to that little segment is.
Yeah, because the first time I played that, I completely missed like one that he even wanted to hear a song, because they're kind of like very vague about it. He's like, I'm just in a terrible mood, and then you have to hear from a different Goron that he's like, oh, Darunia loves music, and you don't even proc the Saria's song until you get like to a certain proximity of those boulders. Like if you just walk by the door, like you don't hear the song, so you'd have no clue to be like, oh, I don't have access to this. Why would I go there?
Yeah.
But then the Goron standing right next to him is like, oh, we love this song, by the way. So it's like like elements of the game that I love, like piecing things together for yourself. Like no one tells you directly what to do, but also being a kid and also that being your second step into the logic of this game. It's like, I remember taking my sweet time running all the way back to the forest and then running all the way through the Lost Woods, and I still didn't super understand the mechanic. Oh no, that's like when you first experienced that the proximity thing again, where getting lost in the Lost Woods and stuff like that. Like, but yeah, I guess there is no compromise, because there is that monumentous, like, this is the first song, Zelda's Lullaby, and then there's that Goodbye with Saria, which I think also would be impeded by she teaching you this like kick-ass kind of upbeat awesome song, like, hi Link, do you fuck with this? Anyways, see you later.
Yeah.
It's supporting itself, but like on toothpicks. Like you can knock this over so easy, but it's still a solution. I don't know. It's like still works.
Yeah, it works. Among other things, Navi will be like, you should go see Saria if you get stuck on like what you're supposed to do during that part of the game. But it is just like a thing where like, you kind of undercut yourself a little bit here, but this game is doing so much so well and doing such an amazing job at the presentation that like the handful of issues that I have with it are fine. Like a lot of the issues I have with the control jank are more about the fact that this game was designed around the Nintendo 64 controller, and subsequent ports besides the 3DS remake never really find a solution around that. Like the Nintendo Switch Online version especially is so like, what do I do? This controller layout is not conducive to this at all, especially because the button inputs aren't displayed on the screen. It's using the Nintendo 64 button input display. And that, like, the thing with like Z targeting is like it feels much more intuitive on the Nintendo 64 controller than it would be on like the other controllers. Like I remember the GameCube port of the Nintendo 60, the GameCube port of Ocarina of Time is using the button layout that Wind Waker does. So that was more like intuitive for me there. But largely, like, it's like a lot of the jank is simply like it's not being played on its original hardware, and that's causing some disconnect. Another reason I like the Ship of Harkinian port is like it kind of like helps you with all that stuff.
Yeah, I guess I can't complain too much because I played it on the 3DS and then on the N64, so I think it always felt like very native and very, well, the gyroscope helps because sometimes I try to catch a Poe on the N64. I'm like, what's the point? I can't do this.
Yeah. If you're not using the gyroscopic aiming for like the things like the Gerudo trial on Epona, then it's like, oh my God. It is certainly trying to figure things out, that game. It certainly came up with a lot of great solutions, and it's still struggling against the limitations of itself. We talked about Darunia needs a banger. What is your favorite track in this game?
Like soundtrack or like a track that you play?
Like let's do it this way. Like, what is your favorite song in the game, and what's your favorite song that you play on the ocarina?
It's a tie. Sorry, like I said, I'm a top 3 all-time guy. I think these two hold equal spacing. The title screen song, just like, oh my God, nostalgia blast every time you turn on the game. Just something about it's so somber and so beautiful, the way that it cues up. And with Gerudo Valley, I think that it comes with the N6. You just love it automatically. But the overworld version of Epona's song, the way that the guitar and the way that Malon's like voice is coming through, that kind of like uncanny, like, singy sound font, I really love that one. I think that is one of my favorite parts, or favorite tracks from this game.
Yeah, I mean, this album is no skips. Every song's great.
Even the item pickups, no skips.
Incredible sound design. When Nintendo goes in on sound design, they go in. All these sound effects are so instantly recognizable and distinctly of this game that it's just iconic. It sticks in my brain. The fact that I can tell apart which item pickup sound it is in each game, that is a miracle. I like the fact that they put variation, aren't just reusing sounds over and over again. They're being considerate of the era and trying to explore how to make things a little different. My favorite song that I play on the ocarina specifically, I love the Bolero of Fire.
That was my favorite ocarina song. It's just so cool when they bring in the A button. I remember that distinct shift because when you learn, I think it's the Temple of Time song, so right before you become an adult, they throw in the A button when it's all been directionals, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, you're right that that's later songs that incorporate the A button, and you're mainly using the C button. That's true. Yeah, but my favorite overworld song, that's constantly changing. I default to Gerudo Valley because oh my god. But you are right that the Lon Lon Ranch music is just incredible. Everything's perfect. The way that the Zora area is just so perfectly able to cultivate that oasis sound. The way that Kokiri Forest is able to just capture the whimsy of childhood. The way that the Song of Storms is so frightening, but also upbeat at the same time. There's a sinister nature to it because it's a storm. But there is also a sense of whimsy to it, which I do think is a really great note on the fact that you learn it in the pursuit of going underneath the well. So it's this upbeat part of your life is also having this dark undertone, literally in the sense that you are going down into the depths of this town and finding the evil that lays within it. God, the music is just so good. That opening theme that you're talking about, nothing in the game sounds like it, but it also sounds so perfectly in line with the game. The sound is so varied. Koji Kondo really put every single aspect of his musical ability into it.
Right, just the range, the variety, but also the instrumentation. I love Goron City so much. No other place in the game sounds like it. Going there is such a kind of a mood shift. It's a very, very upbeat, and you don't take that. The Goron City is just so feel good. You don't take anybody too seriously. Even when you're rescuing all their lives, they're thanks, Link. When you come back after doing the fire temple, everyone's just thank you, Link, you're so awesome. We were so scared of being dead. Gosh, and it blows me away how precise the notes. You only play 5 notes on the ocarina. There's the directional and then the A button, but you learn what is it 12? Is it 12 songs you learn on the ocarina, or is it?
Yeah, 12.
And those 5 buttons, and they have a little flavor text after, which isn't accessible to you on your controller, but the fact that you can play the Prelude of Light, this super bright, gospel-y uplifting tune with the same buttons. You can play the was it the Serenade of Dark, not Serenade of Darkness, whatever one you play to get to the Shadow Temple with like the same breath. It's like so, wow, it's like genius. I can't even begin to understand the music theory behind that. Koji Kondo,
Yeah.
so cool.
The whole game is like doing so much with so little. And just the fact that you're playing music with 5 notes is reflective of that, because a scale doesn't even have 5 notes. It's like an A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, not even accounting for the flats and the sharps and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they couldn't even get like a full scale on it, and the music is still sounding so varied and different, and like a bolero is completely different from a serenade. Like the fact that you are able to play both on your ocarina, and I know like you're only playing the first part of a lot of these songs, but still it's the fact that you're able to do it. That's the beauty of like Koji Kondo's music, is the fact that he's able to play music that is like, the transportation songs aside, but like the fact that he's able to make looping tracks that sound as memorable and like we love so much, because they have to play on a loop. So it's playing continuously whatever era you're in, and you never get tired of it. Like the Gerudo Valley part where you're stealthing through this area can be such a pain in the ass if you get caught because you couldn't look around one corner and see that somebody was about to catch you. But the fact that like as soon as you're thrown in jail, you're just like hearing that Gerudo Valley theme again. It's like, how mad can I be? How mad can I be that I'm here right now?
It's like, all right, I got a fever, and the only cure is more castanets. Like, bringing that Spanish guitar is such a good song. Oh my goodness.
It's great. Incredible. One of the best soundtracks in video games ever. It's hard to overstate how good this soundtrack is, because it's so good. The way that it reinterprets music from A Link to the Past, like the Kakariko Village and Zelda's Lullaby, those are all great. But the new tracks, the stuff that it introduces, is so much and so good.
Mm-hmm. And it's just incredible, like how evocative like each song is for each area. Like, yeah, how you said that even with your medleys on the ocarina, a serenade is different from a bolero, and then who you learn it from too. And also like the interplay, like as you meet Sheik and he teaches you these songs, and then when you play them, the harmony is still together. Like you hear the harp first. Just such a cool, like it's so in tune with this game. That's like a mechanic that I'm so happy that is like ingrained into every aspect of this game. Well, not every aspect, but a majority of it. Very, very cool. Wish more games were more music focused in that way. And I think that's what made me kind of like more picky about the way that music fits into a video game. It's just one, by the sheer instrumentation of Ocarina of Time. I don't know, I just never became like a Bit Crush guy. And the only soundtrack that like really ever really sticks with me is this like very specific, very manicured and limited soundtrack. I guess I love like an orchestra rendition, but there's something very, very powerful about what was done on this soundtrack.
There's an emotional connection that you build with it because it's so diegetic, like the relationships that you build through song. Saria's song is the song that she teaches to you, and that's your close friend, your best friend. Sheik is the person guiding you along these journeys, and every time that they show up, it's really fucking cool, and they say and Sheik says a little poem, and then it's like, here's a little song, farewell. That's Tuxedo Mask shit. I love it. Sheik
it's
rules.
So cool. God, I love Sheik so much, and especially like the non-narrative like tension and feeling that you can feel as like you build this relationship, because they are a stranger to you, at least in the sense of like their personality and like the guys that they put on. But each time you meet them, the amount of time they're on screen lasts, like they linger for a little bit longer. Like there's like this very palpable sadness after you get out of the water temple where they leave, but then the camera cuts, but they're still there taking like another look at you, and then they leave again, and Link is just like none the wiser. It's so I love that interplay.
Yeah, no, it's great. And Sheik's theme is so good too. God, I mean, like it's really good in that build up, and then the spoiler and the reveal. No, not spoil, and then the reveal of who it really is and everything like that. I mean, like it's 26. It's Zelda's Sheik. You've played Smash Brothers. It's so funny that Smash Brothers spoils that detail, but it feels so like the game feels so culturally ingrained that like talking about spoilers for Ocarina of Time feels quaint now. That diegesis with the music and the closeness and the connections that you make with it add to what is already a great soundtrack and what makes it so resonant and sticks with us for as long as it has. I'm a mark for this shit. I gobble it up. I eat it. It's a connector. music is something that connects people culturally, spiritually, and everything. Like, regardless of our differences, it's something that unites all of us. You use Saria's song and you play it for Darunia, who loves it, and he like considers you someone trustworthy, and he gives you the Goron bracelet, and you're able to use that to defeat Dodongo in Dodongo's cavern. And he is so grateful to you for solving that problem for him that he names his son after you, who gives you the red tunic if you time hitting him with a bomb correctly. One of the more, again, esoteric solutions to a puzzle in this game is having to bomb yourself. But yeah, no, I love this game. I love its like themes of connectedness and the very realistic and grounded ways that it makes those connections where even if we're not there for each other physically, we have these mementos and these songs and these things that connect us and make us empathize and bond with one another. So I feel like we've done a lot of talking about the game. What impact would you say this game has made on you?
I guess it definitely defined my taste in dimensionality and also intention with a lot of games. I wouldn't say I'm very picky, but I think I'm very particular because I'm not going to say like, oh, I started with Peak and everything else is like bad. Also I'm an adult, so now I have to like buy my own video games. They don't just like show up on under the Christmas tree or whatever. So I'm always so apprehensive to not get a full experience or to not like 100% be married to everything that this game gives me, because as much as I can critique it, like I enjoy every aspect. There's no part of me when I play Ocarina of Time that is like, I have to go through the Fire Temple. I'm like, no, the Fire Temple, yay! And definitely my interest with fantasy, but also I wouldn't even call it like there's like that kind of like genre bend that we're kind of going through where like this is a dark fantasy or this is like a dark superhero thing where Jacob Geller has that funny video where it's like every Zelda is the darkest Zelda game, which is it's a beautiful sentiment in that. But I think Ocarina of Time does have this like, beautiful, very tasteful dance with the macabre, but also fantasy and whimsy of being a kid and then being an adult, where there is a literal passage of time, there is a literal coming of age, but all of these things can be flipped allegorically. And I just think that's so rich, where there's intention in the game design which reflects the story. And I think I'm kind of always chasing that in terms of like well-contained stories. But also the art direction. What's his name? Yusuke, the person who made all like the promotional art, all like the renders. This game, incomparable style, just like insane volume. I'm pretty sure I still draw like kneecaps the way that he draws like legs. Like I like the way that adult Link looks in his tunic with the white tights. I was like, oh my god, that's how you draw legs. Like that's how you draw faces. So robust and stylish with those heavy spot blacks. I think that I really took that, even though my art isn't representative of exactly what has influenced me, but I think it made me aware of the things that I want in my art and moving forward. Just such a volumetric artist, and I wish he was around more, but like just so beautiful. Also, yeah, the thing that I brought up earlier, video game music. I'm so particular now about it, but yeah, that's the impact on me.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the music. I mean, sound is like the most important thing to get down. I remember hearing advice from like a YouTuber over a decade ago about how their ears are going to be more offended than their eyes are. Their ears are going to be offended more quickly than their eyes are going to be. And sound design and audio quality and the music of something are all core things that you need to get down, because you can have the content, but if you have like an unpleasant audio experience, people are just going to dip away from that as soon as possible. And this game is able to do so much to drive the feeling home with things, with its music. The music is doing so much heavy lifting 26 years after this game has come out to compensate for the lack of, visual fidelity, but like the emotion is still there. The crescendo that begins Hyrule Field's music as you immediately enter there and feel like the opportunity that awaits you out there, even though like the actual Hyrule Field is pretty empty and is more of like a central hub than it is an actual like thing to do things around. I understand why people are disappointed at the emptiness of Hyrule Field, but it's more of a means to an end than an actual like, thing. But I understand compared to A Link to the Past, which has a different thing on every screen. It's a growing pain of transition into 3D. I'm completely veering off the road here. The point is that music is so effective because it just communicates the mood and the tone and carries something that the visuals cannot fully carry on their own. And that's just a miracle in and of itself. The haunting music beneath the well, and the haunting music in the Shadow Temple, the music in the Fire Temple, even that creepiness, that eeriness of the Forest Temple, like they're more ambient than they are like specific sounds, but it just does so well, like being a quiet thing that you can just constantly feel as you're finding your way through these labyrinthian dungeons. The thing that's really resonating with me, having revisited this, is how effective it is at telling its coming of age story. This is a thing where it's like when you're around something for so long, you kind of just almost forget what's special about it. And this is a game that is incredibly special and important to me in terms of what I love about video games in an interactive level. But on an emotional level, something that was lost by the fact that I have been introduced to this thing as a child is like how effective its coming of age story is. I played this game as a child, and the adulthood stuff is a little bit lost on me because I can only really relate to Child Link. And then I could get away from this game for a few years and like put my attention to other Zelda games and really fixate on like the stuff that Majora's Mask is saying on an existential level, the stuff that Wind Waker is saying on an existential level. Coming back to all that now, as an adult playing this game for the first time in a few years, it's like, oh wow, I feel all of this, the loss of innocence, the knowing that you can never go back and you can really only like hold on to the memory of something, like this thing that you can try and encase in amber, but if you try and revisit it, like the reality of it comes crashing down and the changes that you see. The things that this game does with its opening section as young Link, that first third of the game, is so crucial in building like your relationship with this world. So you are absolutely devastated when you come back to these spaces as an adult and see how they've changed and the damage that's been done over time. It is awful. I mean, it's like the same feeling as like coming back to your hometown and seeing like how gentrification has affected things. Like Hurricane Katrina is like something that's very important to me because I have family that live in Louisiana and know how that like has affected the community in the years since it's happened, and how it's like devastated people who have lived in that area for generations, and how they're being uprooted by like the gentrification of that area just being turned into like Airbnbs and tourist traps and things like that. And that's not to say that like Ganondorf is meaningfully representing gentrification and all that kind of shit, or even colonization, but like it's just like this broad evil that is applied over a familiar space that changes it in a way that like wrecks you emotionally. And having now like the framework of like adult problems beyond like the broad way that this game's portraying them, and being able to put those adult feelings into this game, and that loss of innocence and that coming of age and that acceptance of taking on responsibilities that are inherently unfair but need to be done for the greater good. I mean, it's powerful and it's very moving. And that first third of the game does so well at setting that up, and the rest of the game does so good at knocking it over in the best way possible. So people can say like, hey, this game hasn't aged super well on a mechanical level, and I empathize with that. But this game still hits on the emotional level, and the pacing of it does such an amazing job carrying that message. So I'm always going to love it, and it's always going to be important to me. And somehow, despite this being the first game I ever played, and that it set the standard for how I view all video games, it has somehow only grown in my estimation as one of my favorite games of all time. Like it still stays there, and I love it even more somehow, despite the passing of time and the learning more about video games and everything like that, because it just hits so hard emotionally.
Very well put. And it is one of those things that I feel like becomes so timeless through retrospect, like things that just age so well with, I don't know, I think it's interesting that you say that because I come from a very similar background. I was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, and someplace that is contrived with tourism, heavy military presence, and a significant like loss of connection with the land, like indigenously to yourself, your culture, and your time, and being so far from home, and the spans of time in which I come home and see, and grappling with change on an emotional and environmental level. It's like something that I could only apply in this time now, in this viewing myself maybe 7 years ago and to 7 years now. So different, but very well put.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk about this monumental video game. I hope that we talked about everything that you had there in your notes. I had a great time talking about it. And I have the opportunity because I'm going to be talking about this game some more when I get to talk about randomizers and things like that in the coming weeks. But is there anything else you want to say about Ocarina of Time before we move on over to recommendations?
Well, I think there's everything that we need to say has been said. It's so beautiful, and I think there's power in limitation overall. I think we talked about how limited the system was, how limited the mechanics were, how limited their ideas of what could be done and what they are doing because things hadn't been done before. It's just so powerful that whatever you make, it doesn't have to be good. It just has to be made. And it just so happens that this thing came out beautifully, not perfectly beautifully, but it was made, and it did impact like countlessly. The aftershocks are still being felt. And I think no matter what you are into with the game, like where you're at, I think this is a touchstone that everyone kind of needs to, not everyone needs to, but I think if you like video games or any type of engaging medium, this is something that you can appreciate. I don't know, this is something I can see my mom playing, or my neighbor, my classmate, my friend, my colleague, my peer. It is just an experience that I think is very valuable.
It's a very accessible game. I know that like Miyamoto, like one of the design philosophies was that he wanted this game to be as playable for people as possible, like more so than Mario 64 even was his intention. And I do think that a person who is coming to a Nintendo 64 game for the first time would have an easier time with Ocarina of Time than Mario 64. And I say that as somebody who loves Mario 64 to death. So don't at me, guys. This is a game that on a presentational level, on an emotional level, on a script level, I think it endures in a lot of ways. And the jank of it can be overcome with a handy PC port if y'all are ever interested in that. But more than that, I do think that this game is something that ends up greater than the sum of its parts because of a lot of emotional weight and a lot of smart design ideas that were kind of a little ahead of its time. So it was influential for a reason, and we cannot deny that history. And that's why if somebody were like, hey, give me a list of like 20 or so games to help me understand modern video games as they come out now, I'd recommend this game. I would absolutely recommend this game. It's a wonderful little thing. That is The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Before I let you go, I do like to make space to have the guests and I make some recommendations based on the game that we discussed. So stuff that people who would like Ocarina of Time, what else would they like? Whether that is a movie, television show, book, music. What would you recommend to somebody who likes Ocarina of Time, Momo?
In terms of probably movies, I think a really powerful one is Princess Mononoke, and I think that tie between Ghibli and modern Zelda is like really tight right now, which I think is good, but the nebulous forces of good and evil and fulfilling your roles and your identity as a force of nature versus a force of good or humanity are like so interwoven, and also just the visuals of it very tied down in folklore, which Zelda is. I think as it reaches more into the West and like Nintendo proliferates, that a lot of these like high fantasy or esoteric elements are just rooted in folklore. So I think a lot of comparisons could be made there. In terms of video games, I would suggest any Monster Hunter game. I feel like that is like a foray into this wider world of fantasy, not a similar gameplay loop, very different gameplay loop, but accessible in terms of fantasy and its straightforwardness. I really think people could appreciate that. And if you haven't, A Link Between Worlds, it's one of my favorites and really fun. I don't know how accessible it is, but yeah, this is my Rex.
Great, Rex. Love that. Having done this show for over 50 episodes and having done like 5 Zelda games now, I kind of lose track of what things I have recommended based on this Zelda series or not. So I don't know if I've already recommended this one or not, but hey, check out The Green Knight, guys. 2021 film. Really good. Dev Patel's extremely hot in it. But also it does deal with It's the story of the Green Knight, an actual medieval story that is part of Arthurian legend. The actual author of the Green Knight is anonymous, but it is one of those like canonical early stories, and the movie is very much like a very visual experience and very episodic in nature as Gawain makes his journey across the lands in order to pursue the honor that he so desperately seeks. It's also a Christmas movie, and 'tis the season, y'all. That's my first recommendation. The next recommendation I would make that's movies, probably a bit closer and much more something that they're consciously taking during the development of Ocarina of Time, because one of the things that they're trying to evoke with the combat was chambara, which is a term for samurai sword fighting, taken from like the term for like one of the fencing styles. It's what they're evoking when they're designing the combat. Mind you, when I do the combat in the game, my principle is to just smack down a Deku nut,
Pocket sand.
stun them, and then hit them with the sword. I do that as a young kid, and I do it as an adult. It's very effective. I go through fights so much more quickly that way. That Stalfos fight on the boat in the Shadow Temple, that's over in like 20 seconds, and I'm just riding the boat for the rest of the time. Anyway, it's based off of they're trying to evoke that samurai style with the fighting in the game. I'm always going to shout out Akira Kurosawa, one of the best to ever do it as a director. And I would specifically recommend Seventh Samurai, which I watched for the very first time this year. They did a showing of it downtown here in Savannah for the 4K restoration. I got to see that, and was very wonderful seeing that movie for the first time on the big screen. I understand that it is a big ask because it is a over 3-hour long film, though. So if you cannot watch the most famous and the single best like samurai story ever told, one of the most influential films ever made, let me recommend a shorter Kurosawa film, Throne of Blood. It is a Japanese take on the story of Macbeth, and like this way that this game is trying to fuse the medieval with Japanese sensibilities. I do think Throne of Blood is doing it in reverse, where it's taking like Japanese aesthetics but telling a distinctly Western story of Macbeth. So definitely check out Throne of Blood specifically, especially if you don't want to sit down for Seven Samurai for an afternoon. And speaking of samurai, check out Samurai Jack, the story of a samurai who gets pulled out of time and thrown into a future where the villain has won. Great TV show. I feel like that's the closest thing to a TV show version of a Zelda game that we have, particularly Ocarina of Time, because of the whole person thrown into the future trying to return to the past. Gendy Tartakovsky's Samurai Jack. Watch that show. And for a game, Hyper Light Drifter. It's an indie game, very stylish though, very inspired by Zelda, has this sort of downbeat tone that is very reminiscent of the future aspects of Ocarina of Time. If you haven't played Hyper Light Drifter, check that out. Those are my recommendations. Do you have any more recommendations, Momo?
I did. Sorry, you brought up the Green Knight, and I scratched over it in my notes, but I do recommend Adventure Time, which is like such a funny thing to say because I feel like it is such a prolific piece of like contemporary culture. I feel like there's never going to be another cartoon like it, and like the way that kind of influenced the serialization of cartoons and how people approach narrative. But in the kind of the final arcs, his doppelganger Fern does have a Green Knight like illusion. Like he does become the Green Knight, which is so beautiful. I love it. But another tale of coming of age where although like you can kind of pick out the non-serialized episodic bits of Adventure Time, usually on my rewatch, I kind of skip to season 3. But Finn is like such a well-written and thorough fulcrum for so many aspects of the show, in terms of like responsibility, maturation, boyhood, the future, disability, like romance, knowing yourself, knowing your others, like future history. It's so cool. So I would recommend, like, if you started from Stakes and then just watch the rest of the series, he grows so much, even within that short period of time. Adventure Time, super huge recommendation, I mean.
Yeah, I've definitely endorsed Adventure Time at some point during the podcast, probably as far back as when I did Fallout New Vegas, but I'm always pushing that show out there because it's got so much on there. I mean, like postmodernism, post-Dadaism, like ideas, like it is a show that's just throwing so many concepts, philosophical, artistic movements and ideas. They're all just thrown in there. And it's kind of it's like a show that's like a desert island thing where it's like, if you like something, it's going to have it in there in some way. Like it can appeal to anybody. I don't know anybody that hates this show. I think it'd be silly to hate it. But Adventure Time, check that one out. Momo, thank you so much for making the time to be on this podcast. I really am so happy I finally got to talk about Ocarina of Time. Before I let you go, please promote the hell out of yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. I love to hear your insight. And this is the first time I think I've ever had like a discussion about it. It's so crazy to, in my 22 years of being, to verbalize any of these feelings and emotions. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And I guess to promote myself, I'm momopatchi on everything: Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, I guess. I'm directing a film right now. It's called World's End. Kind of the same sentiment of leaving some place and coming back, and it's irrevocably different, and kind of coming to grips that everything you experienced was so much more than what you thought you had or what you were chasing to get back to. And that's in production right now. I think my stretch goal is to have it done by December of next year. But World's End Film on Instagram if you want to peep any of the visuals, keep up with our production. Add me on LinkedIn too. Connect with me there. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm really grateful to have you on the show. You're very insightful, and I'm really glad that we are coming at this, game from the same place of like, yeah, we grew up with it, and reckoning with that feeling of like, how do we talk critically and analytically and emotionally about something that's so like part of our core identity. So I'm glad that I picked somebody who was like on the same emotional journey with it as I was. So thank you, Momo. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of Select and Start. Once again, I'm your host, editor, and promoter, Keifer. If you enjoyed this episode, please give the show a positive review wherever you're listening to this. Engagement helps the show, and your feedback will improve it. And if you want to get more engaged, give the show a follow on Twitter at SelectPodStart and Select and Start on Blue Sky. If you have thoughts about Ocarina of Time or any other game we discussed, send a DM or leave a comment, and I will gladly read it on the show. You can also support me on Patreon. If you pledge at least $1 a month, you'll get early access to new episodes, as well as extended episodes with exclusive content. That's on patreon.com/Keifer's Corner. You can find a link to that and the rest of my projects in the description of this episode. Select and Start is on the Moonshot Network, which is supported by its own Patreon. Find out more on moonshotpods.com. The art for this show is made by my best friend, Avry Ott. You can follow him on social media with the handle at AvryRobinOtt. That's AVRY Robin OTT. The show's theme song was composed by Mike Pettry. You can check out the links in the description for both of their works, as well as Momo's. All right, I think that's it. Time passes. People move. Like a river's flow, it never ends. A childish mind will turn to noble ambition. Young love will become deep affection. The clear water surface reflects growth.
Pocket sand.